Chapter 119. A genius in a second to remember if you like it? System: Streamer Jiang Pengji's first full interactive streaming has ended perfectly. Dear viewers, are you satisfied? A. Satisfied, B. Average, C. Not satisfied. Before the viewers could click, Jiang Pengji quickly added another sentence, which made the system feel embarrassed and treacherous at the same time. Streamer V, the rating of your streaming experience will affect the level of the streaming room. From level 1 to level 2, the upper limit of 3,000 viewers will increase to 10,000. The higher the rating, the more beneficial it will be for the streaming room to level up. This stream is just a test. If the results are good, additional streams will be held from time to time in the future to satisfy the viewer's curiosity and experience. In other words, if you want to continue watching interesting streams and don't want to wait in line for a spot every day, the faster her streaming room can level up, the better your streaming experience will be. If you give a bad review on purpose, she will always remember it. Because of her words, a few naughty viewers who wanted to give a bad review stopped and gave a good review. System: Host, where is your face? It fell on the ground. Do you want me to pick it up for you? Jiang Pengji sneered and retorted, I'm just using all available resources. It's not against the rules. As for the face on the ground, you can pick it up and paste it on yourself. One of us is shameless and the other is thick-skinned. What a good match. What's the point of having a face? The system heard the threat and anger in Jiang Pengji's words. It sent out a string of words angrily. Sob, you're bullying me again. You weren't like this before. You don't love me anymore. Jiang Pengji smiled wickedly. I just like watching you watch me act shamelessly, but I can't do anything about it. System: Why did it hate her so much? The votes from 3,000 viewers ended quickly. The system was even faster. The results came out in a few breaths. Of the 3,000 votes, 2,973 were satisfied, 26 were average, and 1 was not satisfied. Jiang Pengji didn't care about the negative review vote. She knew who voted it without looking. Baijuali, QWQ streamer, I repent. Although I know that the content of your live broadcast is very exciting, and I watch it with relish, I was really scared before. Don't be mad at me for giving you a SOSO evaluation. Black Rose, I'm shocked too, but I think the live stream is just SOSO. It's already a lot of face to give them an average rating. Take it or leave it. Then, a few people sent similar messages. It didn't seem like they were apologizing, but more like they were doing it on purpose to disgust her. Jiang Pengji's expression was the same as usual. Her heart was unmoved, or, she did not care about the content at all. She did not even care about the system. How could she care about the comments of the audience who were separated by a virtual screen and a different dimension? Wouldn't that be making things difficult for him? He quickly glanced at the screen, but on the surface, it looked like his eyes were half closed, as if he was taking a nap. No one could tell what was going on. The system said, although it was your first show, and you used shameless methods, the final result is still very gratifying. 3,000 votes, 2,973 satisfied. In other words, the satisfaction rate was as high as a terrifying 1%. According to the system's contract, if the satisfaction rate was 95% or above, he or she would receive a gold chest. If the satisfaction rate was 80% or above, but below 95%, he or she would receive a silver chest. If the satisfaction rate was 60% or above, but below 80%, he or she would receive a bronze chest. If the satisfaction rate was less than 60%, there would be no additional reward. Jiang Pengji's satisfaction rate was as high as 1%. Without a doubt, she would receive the highest level of gold chest. When the results came out, Jiang Pengji was slightly satisfied with the number. Host V, it's too late today. The live broadcast will end here. Good night, everyone. After that, the virtual screen suddenly turned black. The streamer's status changed from in live broadcast to running on live broadcast. She heard an electronic beep, and the system notified her that she had received a reward envelope with a gold chest inside. The system said excitedly, "Host, do you want to open the chest now?" Jiang Pengji secretly raised her eyebrows and said to the system, "Of course I want to open it, but not now. I'll open it tomorrow." The system was originally waiting for her to show off her luck and open a level-up card in one go. When the streaming room was upgraded to level 2, the system, as a system, would also receive some benefits. But Jiang Pengji was not anxious at all. How annoying. The emperor is not anxious, but the eunuch is. It's okay to wait for one night. Jiang Pengji did not know what the system was thinking, but it was as if she could see its anxious expression. She said leisurely, "It's not the right time. No matter how anxious you are, it's useless." The system snorted and retorted, "Host, who are you calling a eunuch?" Although it was just a system, it also had human rights. It could not be so easily trampled on. The carriage drove all the way to the Lu mansion. After Jiang Pengji bowed to Lu Shi, she went straight to her small courtyard. In another hour, the sky would be bright, but lanterns were still hung in the small courtyard. The whole small courtyard was brightly lit. The courtyard door was not locked yet. Jiang Pengji entered the courtyard and saw the two maids, Takshu and Xuanmei, leaning against the pillars. They could not hide the tiredness on their faces. They had a plain warm cloak draped over their shoulders and their heads were nodding. They could fall asleep at any time. Jiang Pengji did not have to guess to know how long they had been waiting outside. Seeing Jiang Pengji return, Takshu and Xuanmei stood up and went forward to put the warm cloak on her. Naturally, they could smell the strong scent of makeup on her. "Lang Jun, which fox den did you come from?" Takshu, who had a bad temper, could not help but complain after entering the warm room. Xuanmei secretly stared at Takshu, indicating that she should be more obedient and not cross the line. Otherwise, based on what she said just now, she could be accused of not respecting her superiors. A light punishment would be a meal, and a heavy punishment would cost her a month's worth of silver and she would lose her position as the head maid. Jiang Pengji answered smoothly, "Of course, I came from a nest of beautiful fox sisters." Takshu was speechless and could not continue. In terms of eloquence and shamelessness, the two were not at the same level. How could they compare? "If Takshu is curious about the fox den, I will bring you there to see the world the next time I go out." Takshu glanced at Jiang Pengji. "Lang Jun, you always make fun of me. Why would a good girl go to such a shady place?" Chapter 120. A genius remembers love in a second? Get up. I didn't think it through. Ordinary women can't go to that kind of place, in case something happens. So, if she wanted to go there one day, she could only go by herself. The hot soup in the Lu's was kept boiling all night long. Takshu and Xuanmei only had to inform them and they would bring it over. Jiang Pengji took a good bath and washed away all the makeup and fragrance on her body. "It's still early. Why don't you rest for a while? I'll wake you up when it's time." Jiang Pengji changed into her pajamas and shook her head to reject Xuanmei's suggestion. People who had a normal sleep schedule were used to staying up all night. They would definitely be sleepy, but Jiang Pengji was different. As a genetic warrior selected by the Federation, she had undergone a lot of special training, including how to get the sleep the body needed in the shortest time possible. Even an ordinary soldier of the Federation could go 3 to 5 days without sleep, let alone her. "I'm not sleepy yet. Move the books in the study over. I'll read for a while. I'll pay my respects to my mother when it's daybreak." She was still awake and in good physical condition. She didn't need sleep at all. With the candlelight on the table, Jiang Pengji supported her chin with one hand and tapped the table rhythmically with the other. According to the Great Universal Geographical Map, Cangzhou was a battleground for military strategists. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. They could retreat by relying on the natural defenses. They could attack by taking advantage of the terrain, water flow, and complicated terrain. It was difficult for ordinary troops to conquer. It was also the connecting point between Dongqing and the other two countries. There were three natural defenses in Cangzhou: Hanchang Pass, Zhanjiang Pass, and Yumen Pass. It was a battleground for military strategists. Apart from the natural defenses, another important reason was that the water and land routes there were quite developed. Whether it was transporting food or troops, it had advantages that other places didn't have. It could be said that if they could take down the three natural defenses, Hanchang Pass, Zhanjiang Pass, and Yumen Pass, it would basically expose the hinterland of Dongqing to the enemy. Then it would be a flat land for strong troops to conquer. With the convenient water and land routes, the fall of Dongqing would be inevitable. Jiang Pengji frowned. She knew the importance of Cangzhou as soon as she saw the Great Universal Geographical Map. It didn't make sense that the Mengs didn't know the importance of Cangzhou. Even though he knew the importance of the matter, he still allowed Meng Liang to court death and incite the anger of the people. She did not know what to say. But then again, Meng Liang is so fearless. Isn't it because of the Meng's profound background that gives him the confidence to commit crimes? On a smaller scale, it's just a dishonorable son of a noble family provoking the people. But on a larger scale, he's courting death. Usually, the Mengs would have found a way to suppress the matter of Meng Liang and turn it into a small matter. But now, this matter was like a small flame that seemed to be going out at any time. But it could cause a series of chain reactions and eventually lead to a big fire. Unfortunately, she was now in Hejian County and did not know much about the situation in Cangzhou, so she could not make further judgments. After looking at the Great Universal Geographic Map of Dongqing for a long time, Jiang Pengji put away her things. The sky outside was completely bright. Takshu and Xuanmei led the other maids to deliver a set of toiletries on the dot. Jiang Pengji splashed her face with warm water to clear her head. Lang Jun, do you have any plans today? Father won't be able to get up for the time being. Ask the housekeeper to prepare the carriage. I'll go to Shangfu Temple first. I'll be back around noon. If father asks, tell him that I went to Shangfu Temple to visit Master Liaochen. Father will understand. If anyone from the farm comes to pass on a message, remember to write it down and I'll deal with it when I'm back. Jiang Pengji spoke quickly like a machine gun. The system was still thinking about the gold chest. Why did the host go to Shangfu Temple to look for that old monk? Jiang Pengji smiled mysteriously and did not give a precise answer. But the system soon knew her purpose. She climbed up thousands of steps to Shangfu Temple. Unsurprisingly, Jiang Pengji found a monk waiting for her outside the temple. Although the old monk was a bit strange, he had some abilities that were not known to outsiders. Jiang Pengji thought that the monk must have known she was coming when she was still at the foot of the mountain. Didn't he say that her murderous aura caused the Buddha's aura in the temple to move? Liaochen was still in the meditation room. Jiang Pengji walked up to him and sat on the cushion opposite him. I wonder what brings you here today, young benefactor. Master Liaochen chanted the name of Buddha and twirled the prayer beads in one hand. Master, you knew about the Ziwei Emperor's aura just by looking at my face. What else can you see today? Did she come to provoke me behind Master Lu's back? Liaochen carefully looked at Jiang Pengji's face. Other than the fact that the Emperor's aura was thicker and more solid than before, there seemed to be no other changes. Jiang Pengji saw that he did not understand her meaning. Her fingers tapped on the table and she had to be more direct. How's my luck today? Master Liaochen, did she come all the way to see him just to ask such a useless question? The system, it seemed to understand its host's thoughts a little. Master Liaochen deliberated and said, "Looking at your face, your luck is naturally excellent. You are not affected by the evil aura, and your luck is high and vigorous. Evil creatures have brains too, okay?" In actual fact, just based on the baleful aura around her that was so dense that it could not be dispersed, even if there were evil spirits, they would take the initiative to hide far away. Others were afraid of ghosts, but when it came to her, it was the worry of ghosts. "Oh, thank you for your guidance, Master." Jiang Pengji clasped her hands together and made a gesture that was not very standard. Master Liaochen was dumbfounded. Even though he was a highly respected monk, he still had some doubts in his heart. What kind of scheme did this young benefactor in front of him have? In fact, it was as simple as the system guessed. Jiang Pengji only treated Master Liaochen as a human luck testing machine. Today's luck was good, and it was suitable to draw a gold chest. The system, damn idiot. Since she was already here, she asked all the questions she needed to ask to avoid leaving a knot in her heart. "Master Liaochen, there is one thing I don't understand. Who else can see through the so-called Ziwei Emperor's aura like you?" Jiang Pengji felt that this question had to be asked clearly, in case she did not know how she was attacked. "You don't have to worry about this, young lady." Master Liaochen smiled and stroked his beard. "Earlier, I told you that one wrong thought could cut off your chances of ascending to the highest position. This is not absolute. You are not the only one who possesses the Ziwei Emperor's aura." Chapter 121. Master Liaochen nodded. Young almsgiver has quite the spiritual root, that is indeed what he meant. Although that was what he said, the person in front of him had the densest Ziwei Emperor Qi that the old monk had ever seen in his life. When Jiang Pengji heard what he said, she felt much more at ease. On the other hand, this so-called Ziwei imperial aura was practically useless. Whether it was strong or weak, it was the person who affected it, not the other way around. No matter how rich it was, it couldn't turn a drunkard into a wise ruler. No matter how faint it was, it couldn't turn a wise gentleman into a sneaky villain. The relationship between the Ziwei imperial aura and a person should be that the latter determined the strength of the former, not the other way around. "Young benefactor, are you worried that someone will see through this and harm you?" Master Liaochen suddenly smiled. "If that's the case, then young benefactor can rest assured. Anyone who has this kind of eyesight, if it's not someone who has an indifferent temperament, then it's someone who lives in seclusion. No matter what kind of people they were, they would not easily get involved in the changes of the world. The general trend of the world, after being united for a long time, must be separated, and after being separated for a long time, must be united. This was a process that had to be experienced, and it was not something that could be controlled by mere manpower. More importantly, to put it bluntly, there were less than 5 people in the 5 kingdoms who were at the same level as him. Dongqing alone had 6 states and 21 counties. The land area of the other 4 countries could only be larger. In addition to the vast territory of the foreign tribes, no one knew how vast this world was. How small was the probability of meeting a few people in such a vast territory? Even if he was a blind cat bumping into a dead mouse, he wouldn't run into 4 or 5 of them one after another, right? If it really happens, please forgive me. Descending the mountain was much faster than ascending it. Jiang Pengji's wooden clogs were so fast that they seemed to be flying. Soon, she arrived at the foot of the mountain where Shangfu Temple was located. "All right, you can draw a chest now." Jiang Pengji entered the carriage. The coachman skillfully raised the whip and drove the horse back. The system complained about its incompetence. "I really don't want to admit that you're the host. I came all the way here just to see today's luck." No matter how the system ridiculed her, Jiang Pengji remained unmoved. She opened the system mailbox and opened the golden box inside the envelope. He pressed the confirm button in the air, and the box suddenly shattered. The pieces floated in the air and slowly solidified. When the golden shimmer dissipated, a golden card the size of a poker card appeared in front of her. The system, damn it, didn't they say that the drop rate of the level-up card was extremely low? Jiang Pengji raised her hand and took the level-up card. She had a faint smile on her lips. She was not surprised by the result of the lucky draw. See, what did I say? It's red enough, right? The system, which was already a useless fish, said weakly, let's toast tea to the lucky king. Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. She clamped the level-up card between her two fingers. She exerted a little force on her knuckles and an option appeared in front of her. Little Angel system kindly reminds you that the host is currently a level 1 streamer. After using the card, the host will be promoted to level 2. The number of viewers in the live broadcast room will increase to 10,000. Are you sure you want to use the level-up card? A. Yes. B. No. Did she even have to think about it? Since it was a free card, it would be a waste if she didn't use it. Jiang Pengji did not say anything else and opened the option A. There was a crisp rustling sound in her mind. The edge of the virtual screen that was turned off exuded a light gold color, and then it went silent. System announcement: congratulations to the host, Jiang Pengji, for officially becoming a level 2 streamer. The upper limit of the live broadcast room has been expanded to 10,000 viewers. Clusters of fireworks exploded on the virtual screen, and the originally simple and plain live broadcast interface had some light-colored patterns, which looked much better than the previous clean state. Jiang Pengji glanced at the upper limit. It had indeed increased to 10,000 viewers. System, start the live broadcast. Jiang Pengji ordered, and the system immediately responded. The live broadcast had just started, and a group of viewers rushed into the live broadcast room. Deyang Wanwu, I was scared to death. I thought the streamer wouldn't start the broadcast today. Why is it so late today? Fortunately, I had the foresight to queue up a long time in advance. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to squeeze in. Is this the streamer herself? Much better than the video. More importantly, the streamer has a high degree of recognition. The picture quality was absolutely high definition, and the host herself had a pure natural appearance. There were no special effects that focused on her face, no special effects that made it impossible to see her facial features, no flat and thick unibrow, no sharp chin that could stab a person to death, or a face with strange proportions. She was a clear stream in the world of live broadcasting. Mama doesn't have to worry about the baby's face blindness getting worse _ smiley face 3, angle, _ Yejutsan. I heard that the streamer went to the brothel yesterday. I was heartbroken. I didn't manage to squeeze in until the end. I could only go to the Baidu forum to watch the video. I enjoyed it for a long time, and the more I watched, the more I regretted not watching. Kulele Yael, why do I feel that the number of bullet screens today is much higher than before? You sick people, your hands are too fast. When the viewers enter the live broadcast room, they usually don't look at the number of viewers. However, the number of bullet screens on the screen is abnormal. Jojo81, wow. Did I see it wrong? Why are there 10,000 viewers? Jiang Pengji's live broadcast room was somewhat famous in that dimension. It spread in a small circle and attracted more attention. What do the viewers who are always chasing updates complain about the most? Of course, it was not easy to get a seat in the live broadcast room. There were only 3,000 viewers, and it was impossible to get a seat if the internet speed was slow. What about now? Were their eyes playing tricks on them? Host V, this live broadcast room has officially been upgraded. It can now accommodate 10,000 viewers. Asterisk caret _ caret asterisk, faced with Jiang Pengji's bullet screen that was suspected of acting cute, many viewers felt that the contrast was cute. The streamer's words and actions were usually cold or domineering and fierce. When did she have such a soft and cute side? However, when the two completely different styles blended together, there was a different kind of cute contrast. This caused many old viewers to make a ruckus, and the bullet screen was in a mess. Jiang Pengji rarely took the initiative to communicate with the viewers in the live broadcast room. It was the same this time. After explaining a little about the increase in the number of viewers in the live broadcast room, she returned to her usual self and sat quietly in the carriage. The coachman drove the carriage steadily and skillfully. She slept until noon. His pajamas were wrinkled, and his long hair was a little messy. Sitting on the bed, he saw the light coming through the door. His eyes showed some confusion, but he quickly regained his clarity. Outside the room, a maid heard the movement and asked in a gentle voice, "Master, are you awake?" "Yes, I'm awake." He tidied up his appearance a little, and the maids who had been waiting outside the door for a long time filed in. The whole process was silent. Chapter 122. There weren't many masters of the Lu residence. Other than Lu Shi, the second lady, Madame Hu, and the second Lang Jun, there were only the two concubines and their sons and daughters, who rarely appeared in public. The masters had gentle temperaments and would not deliberately make the work of the servants more difficult. In addition, the rules and regulations left by the late wife were clear, so as long as the servants of the Lu mansion completed their tasks, they would have plenty of free time to rest. Tong Sanyang was on her way to the embroidery workshop to buy a new batch of embroidery thread when she passed by a corner gate. What do you think happened in Tsang Prefecture and Meng County? The new purchasing manager of the Lu residence and a few people dressed like commoners were whispering at the corner gate. Tong Sanyang happened to hear the entire conversation. The manager was a little angry at first, but when he saw that it was Tong Sanyang, he couldn't help but put on a flattering smile. He cupped his hands and bowed, "Aunt Tong." Tong Sanyang was 21 years old and unmarried. According to Dongqing's laws, she had to pay an extra tax. Her brother and sister-in-law felt embarrassed and forcefully forced her to get married. She agreed and went to plead with Madame Hu, persuading her to set up her own household. This was the first time in the entire Lu residence. She had Madame Hu's support, so the other managers didn't dare to offend her. Tong Sanyang's expression was cold. "You mentioned Tsang Prefecture and Meng County. What's going on?" The merchants who were stared at by her felt pressured. They lowered their heads and whispered, This, speak." The merchant broke out in a cold sweat and said quickly, "We are traveling merchants from Meng County in Tsang Prefecture. Your mansion ordered a batch of goods from our master, but they were robbed by a group of refugees and bandits when they were delivered. We are here to ask for your grace to be more lenient on the deadline. We didn't mean to delay your time, but Meng County is in a mess now. Looting and burning are everywhere. They were just a group of ordinary merchants. How could they resist the robberies? Even though the Lu residence wasn't big, their food, clothing, and necessities were all exquisite. Every year, they needed to purchase a lot of goods, and they were generous. They were big customers, but the goods they sent were robbed before they could even leave Meng County. Now that they couldn't return the goods, they could only come to the Lu residence to negotiate." After hearing this, Tong Sanyang felt like she had lost her ability to speak. If something had happened in another county, she wouldn't have lost her composure like this, but the problem was, that was Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. When did this happen? Tong Sanyang asked coldly. The commoners bowed their heads and answered honestly, but they didn't expect Tong Sanyang to sneer at them. Although Meng County in Tsang Prefecture is within Tsang Prefecture, it is not very far from Hejian County. It will only take half a month to travel between the two counties at top speed. Such a big thing happened in Meng County. Why hasn't Hejian County heard anything about it after so long? The merchants complained incessantly. They had a lot of bitterness in their hearts, but they had no place to vent it. "Aunt Tong, this incident has been known for a long time. However, the Meng army has gone too far. They don't allow refugees to enter and leave Meng County as they wish, and they also don't allow this news to spread. We wanted to transport the goods out, but we were stopped. After much difficulty, we managed to get the customs documents, but we were robbed by the mob. As they spoke of the sad part, the men were in a sorry state. The money that the Lu residents earned from the goods they ordered every year was enough for them to live on for half a year. Now that the goods were robbed by the mob, they lost their goods and money, and they almost died on the way to Hejian County. Their days were like hell, and just thinking about it made them sad. If the Lu residents felt that they were wasting time and asked for compensation, then their losses would be even greater. Tong Sanyang's face turned solemn, and her palms were sweaty. She seemed to remember something. This matter is of great importance, and we need Master's attention. How about this? Let the steward take you to wash up, and I will report this to Master. If you have anything to say, you can tell Master later. When Tong Sanyang told Lu Xi about the incident, he was burning incense and practicing calligraphy. He was surrounded by a tranquil atmosphere. He put down the brush in his hand without changing his expression. If that's the case, let's ask those people to come here. He was wondering why only a few people knew about such a big incident in Meng County. It turned out that the Meng army had intentionally blocked the news. The Meng army? Ha! Lu Xi felt a flash of coldness in his heart, and a murderous look flashed across his calm eyes. How could you have such a day? Nay! The horse let out a long sigh, and the carriage slowed down until it stopped in front of the Lu residence. Jiang Pengji got out of the carriage and jumped off before the coachman could bring the bench. She saw that there was an unfamiliar carriage parked in front of the door. She frowned and asked the gatekeeper. "Is there a guest?" The gatekeeper answered respectfully, "Second Lang Jun, it's the lady's maiden family." Mother's side? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. I wonder who it is. Because Lu Xi had gone to Hu County to take up his post, the women in the family rarely went out. They rarely interacted with Lu Xi's family, not to mention the second lady's maiden family in Langyi County. They would only interact with each other during festivals, but they rarely interacted with each other. Wild beasts had a strong desire to possess their own territory. They would sense the presence of a stranger. Although Jiang Pengji had not reached that level yet, along the way, there were indeed some unfamiliar traces in the Lu residence that should not have been there, which made her unhappy. Before she entered the house, she could already hear the soft and sweet voice of a young girl coming from inside. The young girl looked to be about 13 or 14 years old, wearing a pink dress. Her eyebrows were like the mountains in the distance, and her skin was like a peach blossom with a smile. Her cheeks carried a bit of baby fat, making her look even younger. Her eyes seemed to be filled with a clear spring, clear and bright. Her nose was tall and straight, and her cherry lips were red even though they weren't dotted, causing one to be unable to help but think of the blooming peach blossoms under the spring sun. "Tsk, another budding lowly. Uncle, is this cousin Lanting?" the girl asked Lu Xi with a smile when she turned her head to see Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji did not need to look at the streaming room to know that the bullet screen was full of screams and howls. No matter which world it was, there was no shortage of good-looking people. "You are courting death, oh, so cute. She has a clear voice and a soft body. She's a pure, natural loli. Lo Siji Lianmeng, I've realized that, so far, the overall appearance of the host's world is really good. There are almost no crooked people. At the very least, they have good facial features. Stop crying. It's a paradise for those who are obsessed with looks." Jiang Pengji glanced at the girl coldly. "Host V, what's so cute about a stick?" Everyone in the streaming room was dumbfounded. Chapter 123. What does that mean? I understand. Jiang Pengji pretended to be cold, but Lu Shi smiled. Yes, this is Lanting. He didn't want to continue the introduction. The girl seemed to realize that, and she looked embarrassed. Jiang Pengji sat down. She seemed to be looking at the tea in her cup, but she was actually sizing up the girl and Lu Shi. There was nothing much to say about the girl. She pretended to be smart, but she was full of flaws. Jiang Pengji believed that even if the girl was blind, she would still be able to smell the unbearable stench on her. What was interesting was Lu Shi's attitude. Even though the man maintained a seemingly intimate but actually distant smile and treated the guest seriously, from his eyes and the slight changes in his facial muscles, as well as the movements of his fingers, it was clear that he hated the girl very much. No. It was not enough to say that he hated her. It was more like finding the dishes on New Year's Eve filled with rotting animal corpses and other creatures' excrement. It was disgusting. The girl seemed to want to talk about Jiang Pengji, but Lu Shi steered the topic away. The two seemed to be friendly, but they talked for a long time. Finally, the girl talked about the main purpose of the visit. She wanted to see the second lady. Jiang Pengji thought Lu Shi would refuse or delay, but she didn't expect him to agree without thinking. She frowned and took the initiative to say to Lu Shi, "The doctor said that my mother is depressed, and it's not good for her to recover. I think she will be happier if she hears that someone from her family is here. You haven't been here for a long time, so I'm afraid you don't know much about the place. I'm overstepping my boundaries. I'll take you to my mother's place." Lu Shi frowned, but he didn't say anything. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Jiang Pengji caught the girl's gaze as if she had eyes on the back of her head. The girl blushed. "Lanting, the emperor is walking in front. How can you say that I'm peeking at you?" Jiang Pengji said coldly, "Oh." Everyone was dumbfounded. The viewers in the streaming room were waiting for her to gain favor with the Lolita. "Ho Dandan, streamer, you can't be like this. QWQ should communicate more with lowly girls. Zhenggang, I feel that the host's reaction is not quite right. She seems to be holding back some big move. Lo Ciji Lianmeng, can I say that as an old driver, I already understand the host's intention? There was something fishy about that girl. The keywords, old driver, and the young lady is fishy. Extended, it meant that the words Jiang Pengji had just said were meaningful. All of a sudden, all the viewers in the live streaming channel expressed, thinking about it is terrifying. However, there were also innocent children who didn't understand and asked questions. Yiguguangspatajupi, why do I feel like you all understand? Can someone explain? Everyone expressed that it was rare to find a clean and pure seedling among a group of dirty old drivers, so it was better not to pollute it. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji intervened. Host V, you'll know when you're old enough. Eating grapes, spitting grape skin, eh? There were so many bullet screens, but the host saw me and even replied. I felt so honored. Jiang Pengji smiled in her heart. She didn't just pay attention to one person's bullet screen. She saw everyone's bullet screen clearly. The two of them were quite lucky. The second lady had just woken up and seemed to be in good spirits. Hearing Jiang Pengji's message, the second lady was slightly startled. She frowned and said, "Help me up." She sat in front of the dressing table and looked at her haggard face in the bronze mirror. Her expression was indifferent as she let the maid help her with her makeup. Her long hair was tied up in a bun. Because she was still sick, she didn't have many accessories on. She only wore 2 hairpins for decoration, so she didn't look too shabby. She had changed out of her wrinkled pajamas and changed into casual clothes that still had the fragrance of honey locust. With the help of the maid, she no longer looked haggard and tired. Instead, she looked more languid and elegant. That's good. Let's go see that. The second madam's tone was stiff for a moment before a beautiful smile bloomed on her face. She gave off a domineering and oppressive aura. My good niece. The second lady's strong aura was similar to the arrogant madam who. For a moment, some of the inexperienced maids muttered to themselves, but they didn't dare to express their thoughts. Instead, they were even more respectful. Jiang Pengji saw the tidied-up second lady sitting in the main seat of the main room. Her eyebrows twitched. What she feared would come true. Mother, you look much better than yesterday, Jiang Pengji said calmly. Jiang Pengji said calmly. She wanted to block the line of sight between the girl and the second lady. Unfortunately, the body she was in was that of a 12-year-old child. It had yet to fully develop, and it was almost a head shorter than the girl behind it. And this is? The second lady nodded and looked at Jiang Pengji lovingly. When she saw a familiar girl behind Jiang Pengji, her smile stiffened uncontrollably. She quickly regained her composure and teased Jiang Pengji with a smile. Which family are you from? You look so beautiful and adorable. Could it be that you brought her here today because you're pleased with her? It was Jiang Pengji's turn to be speechless. She said with a straight face, Mother, please don't tease me anymore. I don't want to ruin her reputation. Could it be that the maidservant who notified Mother just now didn't tell Mother clearly that there's a guest at home today and it's a cousin from Mother's maiden family? The second lady covered her mouth with her handkerchief and chuckled. She glanced at Jiang Pengji. You've really grown up. Can't I tease you a little? After saying that, the second lady shifted her gaze to the girl. She looked at her from head to toe without batting an eyelid. She had a familiar expression on her face. You look very familiar. I wonder which sister you are. Why did they allow you, a girl, to come all the way to Hejian County? The girl turned her head to look at Jiang Pengji awkwardly. She pulled her handkerchief nervously and looked at the second lady longingly. What was going on? She was hinting that it was inappropriate for an outsider like her to be present if she had something important to say to the second lady. Jiang Pengji looked at the girl's movements and eyes in silence. She sneered in her heart. She was smart enough to see through the girl's hint. However, she didn't want to follow the girl's wishes. She refused to move and didn't give her a chance to talk to the second lady alone. The atmosphere was awkward. In the end, the second lady asked Jiang Pengji to leave. Although she was sent out, her 5 senses were heightened at this moment. Even though she was 30 to 50 meters away, she could still clearly hear the conversation between the two people in the room. It wasn't that she had any ulterior motives, but she was worried about the second lady. After making sure that Jiang Pengji was far away, the second lady looked at the girl. You've grown up. As soon as the second lady opened her mouth, the girl suddenly knelt down and kneeled in front of the second lady. Her voice was choked with emotion. Mother. I miss you. Chapter 124. Mother? Son? The spectators were so shocked that they dropped their melon seeds. With the help of the special hidden camera angle of the streaming system, the audience in the streaming room could clearly see what was happening in the room even if they did not have Jiang Pengji's 5 senses. They expressed that they were all scared out of their wits. You're courting death, I'm scared to death. Could it be that the girl is the original owner of the host's body? If she wasn't the original owner of this body, why would she call the second madam mother? At first glance, this logic seemed to be somewhat interesting. However, if one thought about it for a bit, they would know that it was nonsense. Lo Siji Lianmeng, pft, now is not the time to worry about this, right? Didn't you hear that sound? Although the young man's voice was still changing and it was difficult to distinguish whether he was male or female, if one listened carefully, one could still distinguish that there was a big difference between a male and female voice. The voice that the youth blurted out just now was clearly that of a youth, not a girl. In other words, Jiang Pengji's sh*t stir had a deeper meaning. She was really a girl. The viewers in the live stream room clutched their chests, expressing that they were hurt, feeling that they had fallen into a trap. Why would a man dress up as a girl? They could understand cosplay as a hobby, but it shouldn't be built on the basis of hurting their young hearts. Where's your sincerity? Fed to the dogs? It was as if someone had finally managed to hook up with a goddess. After going through a lot of trouble, the two of them agreed on a time, entered the room, and even took off their pants. In the end, the goddess told him that she was a man with a penis and that he could only endure it. Smiley face 3, angle, Wanyan Lulakan, where's the basic trust between people? What about trust? What about trust? Why did they have to hurt each other? Of course, there were also people who were gloating. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, it's so cute. It must be blue boy paper, */w***. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Can you straighten your tongue before you speak? It didn't take me much effort to get it. I thought I would have to turn the entire Hejian County upside down. I didn't expect it to come to me. She casually plucked a leaf, wiped it clean, and held it in her mouth. She had a sloppy look on her face, without the slightest hint of elegance. The system was puzzled. What do you mean by that? Jiang Pengji secretly rolled her eyes. Do you still remember what happened yesterday? He is the leader I'm looking for. He's Meng Liang. The system was so shocked that it typed a few exclamation marks. So he's trying to sneak into the Lu residence and cause trouble? I'm afraid that's not his main purpose for coming to the Lu mansion. Jiang Pengji said calmly, rather than saying that he sneaked in, it's better to say that he moved in openly. His purpose is to get the Lus to help him conceal his identity. Don't forget that Meng Liang is being chased by a captain who disappeared. Maybe that captain is just hiding and following him, waiting for an opportunity to assassinate him. But, how did you know he was Meng Liang? The system expressed that it had initially thought that the other party was a pure girl. Judging from her initial attitude, she should have seen through his disguise the first time they met. If it had not happened last night, the expression on Meng Liang's head would have been, a man dressed as a woman with a promiscuous private life. But Jiang Pengji had already known about Meng Liang's actions. She did not kill him the moment they met, which was something to be thankful for. Jiang Pengji said lightly, with your IQ, I think it's hard to explain. The system, F***ck. Mother. I miss you. The girl, no, Meng Liang could not stop crying. In comparison, the second wife's reaction was more thought-provoking. You have your own parents to love you. Who am I, your mother? She looked down, as if she had seen through the mortal world, but there was a hint of sadness and pity in her eyes. Meng Liang, who had been observing her in secret, saw it. Mother, are you reprimanding me for not being filial and forcing me to die? Meng Liang's eyes were red as he bit his lower lip and whispered, Mother, you're a good person. After separating from father, you got married. Did you think about my situation with brother in the Meng family? That sentence was like a sharp, snow-white knife, piercing into the second madam's heart. A fatal stab. That lowly servant girl instigated father all these years. Not only did she suppress and treat brother harshly, she also supported our son both openly and secretly. Not only did she cause dissension between our son and brother, she also intentionally turned our son into a playboy until he committed a grave mistake. What a vicious scheme to kill two birds with one stone. The second wife looked down at Meng Liang, who was kneeling on the ground and holding back his tears. She said coldly, You've seen it clearly. Mother, you have to save me this time. Meng Liang looked up, his face full of tears. If Mother did not do anything, I would not have been able to live. Mother. I beg you, you have to save me. I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to die with a bad reputation. If I die, that B*TCH will not let brother go. The second wife raised her hand to her forehead. Her head was throbbing. A man doesn't cry easily. You're crying like this. What's the difference between you and a girl? That B*TCH is good. She raised you into a man who is neither a man nor a woman. You don't have the noble bearing of Duke Meng. You know she's trying to kill you by flattering you. Why didn't you control yourself? Instead, you chose to indulge yourself? Her voice became stern and she scolded him. Meng Liang looked respectful on the surface, but he was secretly clenching his fists. The second wife's heart softened. Tell me, what did you do this time? Mother, don't be angry. I didn't want this to happen. Meng Liang quickly said, although I know she's trying to kill me by flattering me, I've been wearing this mask for too long. In the end, I can't tell who is who. I swear to you that I did not do those heartless things. That B*TCH deliberately framed me. She wanted to destroy me completely to pave the way for the baby in her belly. Get to the point. The second wife's chest was heaving up and down. She seemed to be angry. Meng Liang mumbled about what happened in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. However, when it came out of his mouth, he had another explanation. The death of the commandant's wife and daughter really had nothing to do with me. That was clearly a false accusation. But because of my ridiculous behavior, everyone in the Meng family believed it was true. That B*TCH even hit me when I was down. Father said that he doesn't have a son anymore. He even wanted to use rattan to beat me to death. If I hadn't pretended to be a maid and escaped, I'm afraid I would have been. At this point, Meng Liang's body trembled. He seemed to remember the feeling of being beaten by rattan. Chapter 125. A genius in a second remember to go away? We provide you with exciting novels to read. Wan Yin Lolikan, listening to their conversation, I suddenly feel sorry for the boy named Meng Liang. His mother divorced his father at a young age, and he seems to have an evil stepmother. Most of the ridiculous things he did after that were led by someone else. Even if he's responsible, it's only 50%. After all, it's hard for a child to survive without his mother's protection in ancient times. Cafeteria Daphne Auntie, seeing him cry so pitifully makes my heart ache. He was almost beaten to death by his father, and he had to disguise himself as a woman to escape. After escaping, he took the blame and was chased by some military officer. He's still young, just a kid. People with good looks were always more likely to receive preferential treatment. After learning about Meng Liang's tragic experience, a large number of viewers in the streaming room switched sides and expressed their sympathy for the boy. Of course, there were also a small number of viewers who disagreed with the sentiment. Tudu Faccio, smiley face 3, angle, although I was also shaken, the host didn't seem to have any reaction. I even felt that the smile on her face was a little sarcastic. Based on my trust in the host's intelligence, I felt that Meng Liang didn't deserve any sympathy. Lanky Yubuz, I agree. If I don't want to be slapped in the face by the plot twist, I'd better take the host's side. Jiang Pengji held a leaf in her mouth, multitasking. She watched the bullet screen while paying attention to the touching meeting between the mother and son in the room. At the same time, a bunch of data about the second lady flashed in her mind, slowly forming a clear outline. Up until the end of the mother and son conversation, what Jiang Pengji was worried about didn't happen. Meng Liang behaved the whole time. That night, when the second lady came out to have dinner with her family, Madame Hu said that she wasn't feeling well. The two of them were like kings who didn't see each other. Jiang Pengji followed the rule of not talking during meals and finished a portion of food for 3 people. She forgot to mention that when the maid served her, the rice in the bowl was compacted, and the meat and vegetable dishes were plentiful. Maybe, it was more than 3 people's portions? Thinking about how the others ate like cats, she felt that she probably ate 4 or 5 people's portions. Although Meng Liang was the second lady's son, he was still considered an outsider in the Lu manor and couldn't stay in the inner court for too long. Father. Jiang Pengji sat in front of the desk and practiced her handwriting. It was better to have someone to teach her. At least her handwriting had improved a lot. Lu, she grunted in response. She put down her pen and asked seriously, that Meng Liang, is he really mother's biological son? Lu Shi's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness and helplessness. Nominally, that should be the case. On the other hand, it isn't? Jiang Pengji asked. Lu Shi was choked by the rhetorical question, but he didn't want to reveal everything so quickly. He still wanted to struggle. Yes or no, what's the difference between the two? If it is, leave his corpse intact and give him the last bit of dignity. If it isn't, he will naturally die without a complete corpse. Leaving him alive is just a waste of food. Jiang Pengji wouldn't take the initiative to poke her nose into other people's business, but it was a different story if someone took the initiative to bump into her. Lu Shi focused on the former and asked in disbelief, if Meng Liang was really your aunt's son, why would you think that I wouldn't? Jiang Pengji looked at him in confusion. Does it have anything to do with family? Lu Shi was stumped by the question. Legally, it didn't have anything to do with the family, but what about the family? Jiang Pengji took a sip of tea to moisten her tongue. What you said just now also shows that Meng Liang isn't. It's impossible to argue with a non-existent hypothesis over an impossible question. She felt like she had nothing better to do. Lu Shi couldn't help but blush when he heard what she didn't finish. Meng Liang did evil, so someone will punish him. Even if Meng Liang did deserve to die, he didn't understand why his daughter was so eager to kill him. For justice? First of all, Meng Liang is a child of the Mengs. He is loved by his parents and elders. Look at how much trouble he caused in Tsang Prefecture. How did the Mengs deal with him? He was secretly sent out of Tsang Prefecture to seek protection in Shangjing. In other words, Meng Liang is someone the Mengs must protect. The government still has to rely on the Mengs' reputation, and the Mengs also need to guard Tsang Prefecture. So how could Meng Liang die? Meng Liang escaped from Tsang Prefecture and even had the mood to harm the girls in Hejian County. How was he in danger? As for seeking protection from the Lus, half of the reason was that he was being hunted by the county military officer. With Lu Shi's influence in Hejian County, the county military officer couldn't do anything to him, so Meng Liang could rest easy. The other reason was that he had his eyes on the women of the Lus. Lu Shi had to admit that what Jiang Pengji said was true, but he didn't think it was a reason for her to want Meng Liang's life. I don't want to hear these high-sounding reasons. Tell me what's on your mind. There are 3 reasons. First, a cockroach jumped into my house. Can't I slap it to death? Second, Meng Liang entered the house under the guise of my mother's daughter. That identity can save his life, but it can also kill him. It's a good opportunity, and I don't want to miss it. Even if someone died, it would be the second lady's niece. What did it have to do with Meng Liang? What's the third reason? Lu Shi thought that was her reason. Meng Liang is useless, but it's worth it to use his life to buy people's hearts. Jiang Pengji smiled. The corners of her eyes turned up as she smiled, which made her look more cunning. Lu Shi sat where he was in silence. Buy people's hearts? For that county military officer? Huh. It was a good deal. But Dongqing hadn't been destroyed yet. Was it a good idea for his daughter to cause trouble so early? Lu Shi had misunderstood. Was Jiang Pengji the kind of person who wanted to see the world in chaos and cause trouble everywhere? She admired the county captain. He was a courageous man. Coincidentally, Meng Liang was in her hands. Coincidentally, the troop that she was training was lacking a courageous leader. So, why not have the best of both worlds? Save the county captain, get rid of Meng Liang, and find an alpha wolf for the troop? As the saying goes, a good leader can change the atmosphere of an army. The county military officer had led troops in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. Even though she didn't know how capable he was, he could betray his former master, set fire to the governor's manor, and escape unscathed. TSK, if the Mengs didn't value him, she would put him in an important position. Together with Su Ku, one was in charge of external affairs, and the other was in charge of internal affairs. It was a perfect match. As for whether or not the other party was willing to submit, it was not a problem for him to go from a county military officer to a small leader of a small troop. Chapter 126. The system said, "So you plan to use Meng Liang's life in exchange for his loyalty? Have you asked for Meng Liang's opinion before doing so?" Jiang Pengji snorted and asked the system, "Do I need to ask for the opinion of a prisoner who has been deprived of all his rights?" The system said, "You want to go to heaven?" Jiang Pengji laughed and rolled her eyes. "I've never come down from heaven." The system was speechless. Could she be any more shameless than that? The system was not the only one who thought that Jiang Pengji wanted to go to heaven. Even Lu Shi felt the same way. At a time like this, shouldn't a normal person be thinking about how to get rid of the hot potato that was Meng Liang? Or should they be preparing to protect themselves so that they wouldn't get revenge because of Meng Liang? But what about Jiang Pengji? Her first reaction was to use Meng Liang as a favor to win him over. Could it be that this was the main reason why she could become the Taizu of the Jiang dynasty in the future, and why all her opponents who competed with her for supremacy were either killed or imprisoned forever, and almost none of them could die of old age? To be honest, for the first time, Lu Shi felt the pressure on his shoulders. "Father, you don't agree?" Jiang Pengji frowned when she saw Lu Shi's silence. She recalled the conversation and felt that she had overlooked something. "It's not that I'm against it. From the bottom of my heart, I support it. But... Lanting, don't you think you're being too cold? It's just a silly assumption, but if it's true, then Meng Liang is your stepmother's son. Have you thought about how sad your stepmother will be when you say you want to kill Meng Liang with your own hands?" Lu Shi wanted to be tactful, but the words that came out of his mouth were too direct. "Your mother treats you well. Can you bear to kill her son in return?" Jiang Pengji looked down. Lu Shi's question was indeed something she had overlooked. Or rather, she had never cared about it. In ancient times, people were particular about bloodlines, but Jiang Pengji had never had such an impression. She was an orphan from the Federal War. Her parents' dates of birth and death were unknown. She had no memory of them at all. It was not that she did not remember them, but her memory had been erased. This was something that almost every genetic warrior would experience. Genetic warriors were a combat force secretly nurtured by the Federation. They were born for the sake of victory. As long as they were absolutely loyal, the rest of their memories would only be a burden. Before being nurtured, those memories were not allowed to exist. This was also to screen out the possible existence of spies. However, Jiang Pengji was probably an anomaly because her memory had not been completely erased. She vaguely remembered some old things. Of course, those past events were not pleasant memories for a 3-year-old child. I have indeed neglected this point. However, even if I have misgivings, so what? Out of respect for my mother, I'll turn a blind eye to it. Allow a disgusting insect to strut around in front of me, and then continue to do dirty things to the women in the residence? In my opinion, this kind of conflict is meaningless. If mother blames me for Meng Liang's death... Jiang Pengji paused and smiled. "Father, you've reminded me. If Meng Liang is to die, he should die by someone else's hand. Lu Shi was speechless. What she said seemed to make sense. Regardless of whether she was conflicted or not, the result would be Meng Liang's death. So, why was she conflicted? She expressed her struggle through her rich and painful inner thoughts. She expressed that she cared about the second lady's feelings, and then she continued to do what she had to do after the pain. Meng Liang still had to die. From Jiang Pengji's point of view, it was no different from taking off one's pants and farting. After a long time, Lu Shi let out a long sigh. If your mother heard this, I don't know how heartbroken she would be. Yes, she would be heartbroken, not sad. Jiang Pengji did not know that the mother Lu Shi was talking about was not the second lady, but Gu Min had once told Lu Shi that, according to historical research, the Emperor Chen of the Jiang dynasty had a very serious emotional disorder. It was a very serious mental illness, so serious that it caused political turmoil. In other words, his daughter had already started to get sick, but it was not as serious as it seemed. Thinking about this, Lu Shi's other emotions gave way to the heartache in his heart. He was secretly glad that it was better to find out sooner than later. The sooner he could see the doctor and take the medicine, the sooner he could recover. He raised his hand and stroked Jiang Pengji's hair. It's okay. Let the doctor come and take a look. You can't hide your illness for fear of treatment. What kind of illness was mental illness? Lu Shi did not understand because he was not a doctor. That kind of problem should be solved by professionals. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She had thought that it would create a rift between her and Lu Shi, or that he would be wary of her, but things did not go according to plan. Lu Shi reminded her, Meng Liang is indeed a fake, but your mother does have a son. He is Meng Liang's brother, Meng Heng. If you meet him in the future, don't fight and get along with him. He is a talented person. Was he hinting for her to poach him? Jiang Pengji thought expressionlessly, if Meng Liang is not my mother's son, why would he do that? Even if he was a fake, he should be pretending to be Meng Heng, not Meng Liang. It's a long story. The grudges of the previous generation are all about the private affairs in the backyard. Lu Shi looked worried when he mentioned it, but he did not hide it from Jiang Pengji. You are not young anymore. It's good to hear about it. Otherwise, you will be deceived in the future. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Wait a minute, there seems to be something wrong with these words. Lu Shi continued. He changed the way he addressed her to distinguish Gu Min from his second wife. When your aunt was still a virgin, her name was Gu Zhen. Although she was a daughter of a concubine, she was very close to Gu Min. She was like a mother to Gu Min, so she was not much different from a legitimate daughter. When she was 15 years old, she was engaged to Meng Zhan of the Mengs. But most men in the world like the new and hate the old, and few are devoted. Meng Zhan. I was wrong. I didn't expect him to be a beast in human skin. Jiang Pengji listened carefully and frowned. Is the Meng Zhan you mentioned the current chief of Meng Prefecture? The man who connived with Meng Liang, forced his men to betray him, and burned down the chief's manor? That was incredible. Lu Shi looked disgusted when he mentioned it. Yes. Chapter 127. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. How did the second lady know that Meng Liang wasn't her son? It was simple. She tried her best to give birth to the child. She heard people say that the cinnabar mole between her husband's eyebrows was beautiful and that he was blessed. But when she woke up, she found that her son didn't have a cinnabar mole between his eyebrows. He was born weak and small. 2 days later, she heard that Meng Zhan's concubine had given birth to a child who died prematurely. Because the child died prematurely, it was buried hastily. Also, the child had a mole between his eyebrows. The second lady was suspicious. She tried to ask Meng Zhan about it to see his reaction. However, the relationship between them had been broken for a long time. Meng Zhan always yelled at her and humiliated her. He didn't care about her dignity as the matriarch of the family. He helped his concubines torture her. The second lady's body quickly deteriorated due to the oppressive life and the lack of care after the birth. But this violent life was just the beginning. Meng Zhan believed that the second son she gave birth to was the son of adultery. He hated her to the core. How could he let her stay in his yard so comfortably? But if he killed her, he thought it would be too easy on her. 5 or 6 years of torture was enough to turn a beautiful lady into a woman with sunken eyes. She was as skinny as a stick. She looked like neither a human nor a ghost. Meng Zhan didn't want to kill her. But it was better to stab her than to torture her with a blunt knife. In the first 2 years, Meng Zhan and your aunt had a good relationship. There were some conflicts, but nothing serious. I went to Meng County with Gu Min to visit your aunt a few times. Not long after, your eldest brother passed away. Gu Min's health was getting worse. The two families had less contact. It was my fault for trusting Meng Zhan too much. I didn't realize that the things we used to communicate with each other were not prepared by your aunt. Gu Min's body got better after she gave birth to twins. When she started to manage the account books again, she realized that there was something wrong with the communication between the Lus and Meng Zhans. Gu Min, who was always smart, noticed something was wrong. She tried to send invitations to the Mengs a few times. Of course, none of the invitations reached Gu Zhen. They were like stones in the ocean. The Mengs of Zhangzhou are so powerful. No matter if I visited your residence or sent an invitation, I was unable to see your aunt. At that time, Lu Shi felt that his wife was overthinking things. He and Meng Zhan were classmates and close friends. They were also brothers-in-law. Gu Zhen was in Meng Zhan's backyard. What could possibly happen? In the end, he was slapped in the face. Gu Min couldn't find out what had happened in the backyard of the Meng's residence, but she could start from other places. Finally, after much difficulty, he managed to find the maidservant who had once served Gu Zhen. Only then did he manage to get some information from her. Meng Zhan seemed to be extremely dissatisfied with Gu Zhen occupying the position of his wife. He wanted her to abdicate. Of course, none of the women who had entered the Meng's residence could leave. Regardless of whether they lived or died, they had to belong to the Mengs. Min heard from the maid that Meng Zhan's favorite concubine had threatened to turn your aunt into a human swine. At that time, she didn't think about anything and directly went to the door to ask for your aunt. If it weren't for my vigilance, I might not have been able to escape unscathed. Jiang Pengji pursed her lips. How dare you be so arrogant? Lu Shi sneered. His eyes were full of sarcasm. That's arrogant? Gu Min had forced herself to go to the door and take away the wife of a noble family. She had even let all the children of the Meng see Gu Zhen's grotesque appearance. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell how heartless Meng Zhan was. He had tortured the wife of a noble family to such an extent. The whole Mengs had been humiliated. Gu Min was so angry that she asked Lu Shi to write a letter of separation for Gu Zhen in a fit of rage. As for whether to persuade them to separate or not, well, Gu Min wasn't a sister who couldn't afford a divorce. What right did she have to make her sister compromise and be abused as a maidservant? Of course, with the power of the Mengs, the scandal didn't spread, but the hatred had been formed. Your aunt already knew that Meng Liang, who was the second son of the Mengs, was not her biological son. He was the son of a concubine. However, the Mengs didn't seem to know that. Meng Liang thought she didn't know either. Otherwise, why would he walk into the trap? At this point, Lu Shi suddenly showed a trace of a smile. Jiang Pengji smiled helplessly. My mother is just being naughty. How did it feel to hear the son of one's enemy call one's mother and call his own mother a lowly servant in front of one's face? It did relieve some of my anger, but more than that, it was suffocating. Lu, she sighed. The Mengs were powerful. They wanted to take her back and punish her many times. At first, Gu Min was strong enough to protect her, but then Gu Min passed away. My position as a father became a bit awkward. One was a divorcee, and the other was a widower who had lost his wife. The latter always protected the former. As time went by, there were all kinds of ugly words. Later, due to various considerations, Lu Shi finally agreed to remarry. His wife was Gu Zhen. Even so, she has been living in fear all these years. She is sensitive and thinks too much. How can she recover? Because of her eldest son, Mengheng, Jiang Pengji said with certainty. Lu Shi nodded. She lost her second son, but her eldest son is still in the Mengs. I thought that even though Meng Zhan is despicable, even a vicious tiger would not eat its own cubs. I didn't expect that your aunt would take it to heart, and her health became worse. The second lady's life in the Lus was not good, so her eldest son could be less tortured in the Mengs. So, that's why my mother pretended not to know the truth when she saw Mengheng. Yes. It was indeed frustrating. Lu Shi sneered. She was born in the wild. The Mengs of Zhangzhou are just a joke. At the same time, the audience in the streaming room exploded. Sleeping Sanguoxiangshan, watching the whole story. Women in ancient times had a hard life. The second lady was born in a good family, but her husband's family was so powerful. They wanted to torture her, but she couldn't even fight back. Yanling Shi, how is this just being powerful? He was simply a local tyrant. He could come and go as he pleased. So what if one wife died? There were still millions of other wives waiting to marry into his family. Aya Jiaoteng, it seems like the girls in our era are happier. At least they can get a divorce. Not like here, where a divorce is fatal. You might even be dragged back into the pond. It's scary. Huaxia da ji ji, maybe it's just an extreme case. I watched the streaming. The host was riding in a carriage, and there were young women on the road. It shows that the social mores are not that restrictive to women. There are all kinds of birds in a big forest. The Meng seem to have a high social status. It's not an exaggeration to call them local tyrants. They have power and the right to do whatever they want. Sans Hisongshu snacking, social productivity determines social status. Even if the social mores are open now, they will be closed sooner or later. It's an unchangeable historical trend. Women's status will only get lower with men's demands. Jiang Pengji was lost in thought as she read the bullet screen. Chapter 128. The Internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. If she had died in battle, she would have had peace. But who would have thought that she would have a second life? Jiang Pengji had no sense of belonging to this world. Her life was forced upon her by the system without her consent. But since she was alive, she would not seek death. The federal soldiers could die however they wanted, but they could not commit suicide or lose their will to live. That was the behavior of a coward. So she chose to live well. She treated it as a retreat from the battlefield and a leisurely vacation. Which one of the vacations did not pursue a happy mood? If they did not like it, they would either completely destroy it or change it into something they liked. Why force themselves to get used to it? The world should change for me, not the other way around. Don't you think so, system? Jiang Pengji asked with a smile. The system was silent for a while, then complained, "Isn't it enough for you to go to heaven? Do you want to pierce the sky? If you have the ability to show off, come down here if you have the ability. The sky is not paper. How can it be pierced? Jiang Pengji pretended not to know and refuted the system. She liked to see the system stomp its feet and complain. It was so cute that it could not do anything about her behavior. The system endured the pain and said, "That's enough. If I talk to you again, I will have a heart attack and go back to the furnace to be reborn." Jiang Pengji had a faint smile on her lips. She looked at the waterside pavilion in the courtyard. No one knew what she was thinking. Night fell. The hustle and bustle of the day subsided. The quiet night shrouded the land. The second lady rested in peace for a few days. She looked a little better. However, she had been sick for many years. Even with the continuous supply of good medicine, she did not know when she would be able to recover the vitality she had lost. She gritted her teeth and saw her son in name. The second lady's mood fluctuated greatly. Her eyes were full of malice. Her mood fluctuated too much. When she returned to her bedroom, she naturally became even more ill. The maid hurriedly called for a doctor. "You still don't like to drink medicine. Eat some candied plums." She entered the room and saw her covering her mouth in disgust. He could not help but be speechless. He took the box of candied plums from the maid. The second madam took it and said in a low voice, "Brother-in-law knows me best. He knows that I don't like to drink those bitter medicines. It doesn't matter how much you know. You still have to drink. Otherwise, how can you take care of your body?" She smiled. "Don't eat too much. You'll get sore teeth. Brother-in-law has always been someone who doesn't come to the temple for no reason. Since you suddenly came to my place today, you must have something to tell me." The second lady didn't listen to his advice. Instead, she stuffed the candied plums into her mouth one after another. Only then did she suppress the bitter taste in her mouth. "Just say it." She couldn't help but sigh. Although they were husband and wife in name, they did not have a physical relationship. Rather than husband and wife, they were more like brother and sister. Every time he saw the second madam, he would suddenly think that she was still the naive and clingy girl who liked to pester Amin. However, it was different now. Shi, who had always been calm and steady, couldn't help but feel his hands itch when he thought of the culprit who had caused her to become like this. The Meng family is in trouble. Meng Zhan's county governor's office was burned and Meng County is filled with rioters. The Meng family's army is afraid that the news will be leaked. Instead of appeasing the people, they try to suppress them with blood. This is making the people even more angry. If you want to step on them, this is the perfect opportunity. The second madam was stunned when she heard the news. Then, she burst into laughter. Tears of laughter rolled down her cheeks. "I was wondering. I thought the family couldn't bear to see me living a good life and purposely came to humiliate me. I didn't expect it to be like this." The second madam laughed so hard that tears were rolling down her cheeks. Shi's heart ached when he saw her. All sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. He didn't feel good at all. "Brother-in-law, didn't you say that you'd rather tear down a temple than ruin a marriage?" Shi shook his head. "You hold a grudge. When did you say that?" "Before Amin left, the person she let down the most was you. I also owed you a lot. You are my wife's sister and my wife in name. If I don't protect you, am I supposed to protect Meng Zhan? He married her, but he couldn't fulfill his obligations. He made her live like a widow. That was his fault. She would always remember his mistakes." The second madam lowered her head with a smile. "Brother-in-law, you make me feel ashamed. If you hadn't taken me in, I wouldn't have become the madam of the Liu family. If we're talking about owing something, it's naturally me who owes you and brother-in-law. After all, this position belongs to my sister. Even if she hadn't taken her in, no one would have dared to say anything. She didn't owe her anything. Marrying her had caused Lu Shi a lot of trouble for no reason. His wife had died and he had married his wife's sister. She had been divorced and her reputation had been ruined. People who didn't know the truth wouldn't think too much. The Meng family had slandered her and accused her of having an affair with Lu Shi. She didn't even dare to think about those days. Lu Shi smiled bitterly. Was he really not responsible? Meng Zhan was his classmate and good friend. He was also a descendant of a loyal family. His ancestor was famous. He was the Xia dynasty's god of war, Meng Jing. Compared to the other candidates, Lu Shi naturally favored his classmate more. He was confident that he understood Meng Zhan and felt that he would be a good man. However, the result was a slap in the face. If he hadn't been blind to pick on Ah Min's brother-in-law, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. The second madam seemed to understand Lu Shi's thoughts. She sighed and said, "If not for sister's pity, I would have been tortured to death by those servants long ago. Although I have a biological father, it is better than not having one. My deceased mother's status is low. Who in the Gu residence cares about me? Only sister is kind and benevolent." Gu Min was only a few years older than her, but she always felt like her sister had raised her. If not for sister saving me from the well back then, would there be the Gu Zhen of today? The first madam did not care about Gu Zhen's marriage. It was her married sister who helped her pick a good husband in private. She screened those talented and virtuous men carefully. They were all good husband candidates. However, Gu Zhen was blind and chose the worst one. If she had not been stubborn and rebellious back then and had married the man her sister had painstakingly picked, her life now would be so comfortable that those noble ladies would die of envy. However, her life now was pretty good. The second madam looked down and curled her lips up slightly. She would be content with what she had. She would take good care of her sister's only child in this world. She would enjoy the blessings that her sister could not. Now, she could recuperate in peace. The real good days were yet to come. As for Meng Zhan, it was as her sister said. Take revenge if you have a grudge, and take revenge if you have a grudge. Humans only live for a few decades. If you can be stubborn, why let yourself be sullen? Every dog has its day. There will be a day when Meng Zhan will kneel at my feet like a stray dog, as lowly as an ant. Chapter 129. The humiliation she had suffered in the backyard of the Meng family, the nightmares she had endured, and the pain of losing her son would all be repaid by the culprit 1,000 times over. Not only that, but he also had to avenge his sister. She knew her sister very well, and her brother-in-law treated her very well, unlike her who was tortured in the Meng residence. How could she have a shorter life than her? Lu Shi sighed softly. He had no temper with his deceased wife's stepsister. You don't have to mess with Meng Zhan because of me. It's not that I don't work hard, but I don't want you to dirty your hands for someone like that. The second lady's eyes flashed with anger. What does he have to make you worry about him? But if we miss this opportunity, I'm afraid that given the resources of the Meng clan, it will be difficult to shake them. The second lady snorted coldly and glanced at Lu Shi. Brother-in-law has always been ruthless. Why are you pretending to be ignorant now? Lu Shi was speechless. Could he say, black-hearted and vicious, was not a good word? They really were sisters. Praising someone was like scolding someone. Opportunities don't come often, but it's not like there won't be a next time. When killing an enemy, the most taboo was not to kill with one strike. If my brother-in-law trampled on the Mengs this time, it wouldn't hurt at all. Instead, it would incite their hatred and bring trouble to our doorstep. Brother-in-law has been operating in Hu County for many years and it is not easy to get such a good position. If we lose it because of this, it will not be worth it. If I'm going to fight, I naturally have to kill him in one strike. The second madam smiled coldly. She had endured those years of living a life worse than death. She could afford to wait a few more years. She stared at her for a long time and heaved a sigh of relief. It's great that you can think that way. The second madam glanced at him and said angrily, does brother-in-law think that one, is an ignorant girl? I'm just worried that you'll take things too hard, she muttered. Although she had married the man in front of her and given her a place of protection, she was stubborn and opinionated. She knew that the Meng family would not let it go so easily. In order to prevent the Meng family from implicating her further, she refused to cooperate with them. She did not take the medical officer's advice to heart. She was delaying her illness, torturing herself, and refusing to receive proper treatment. How could Xi's heart bear it? Now that Gu Zhen was willing to let go, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart. If she continued to be stubborn, as her brother-in-law, there was nothing he could do. It's good that you've thought it through. Recuperate well. As long as you get better soon, I'll provide you with delicacies every day. Of course. When have I ever been polite to brother-in-law? The second madam snorted and asked, let's not talk about this first. Have you thought about how to deal with Meng Liang? How dare he openly claim the title of my son? Is he worthy of that with his background? She thought about it carefully. Jiang Pengji's words appeared in his mind, and he revealed a little. Every wrong has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Why are you dragging an innocent child into this? Xi's first sentence made the second madam's face darken, but the second half of his sentence lightened up. Moreover, your brother-in-law is the chief of a county. I can't do anything to a child. The second madam was smart, or else Meng Zhan would not have fallen in love with her at first sight. The Mengs were a prestigious family in Dongqing, and Meng Zhan's wife was at least the daughter of an aristocratic family. Even though the second madam was later recognized as the daughter of the first wife, her status was still much lower. Xi's words were vague, but as smart as she was, she immediately understood what he was hinting at. With Xi's current status, it was indeed embarrassing for him to make a move on a junior, but it shouldn't be a problem for his children, right? However, the Mengs were still deeply rooted in Dongqing, and they could not be easily shaken. If he wanted to do anything to Meng Liang, he could not drag the Lus into it, lest the furious Mengs pursue the matter. It was not worth alerting the enemy now. In a few words, Meng Liang's situation had become extremely dangerous, but Xi did not have the slightest premonition of impending danger. Just like what mother said, the Lus are a pile of mud that can't be helped. Look, I can see the fire in Lu Zhongqing's eyes, but he has to suppress his anger. He doesn't dare to touch me. He is such a coward, but father still thinks he is powerful and fears him everywhere. The girl, who was originally beautiful and charming, was lying on the comfortable bed. She tilted her head and saw the neatly arranged clothes on the side. She casually picked them up with her fingers and snorted in disgust, as if she was holding something dirty in her hand. This is so shabby. This kind of lousy material is only worn by the servants in the manor. Lu Zhongqing actually sent it here to humiliate me. She followed Meng Liang into the manor, and the manservant who was pretending to be a maid hurried forward to stop Meng Liang from throwing the clothes out. She kept muttering, "My Lang Jun, you are wandering outside, so of course you are not as good as in the manor." Although this kind of material is shabby, it only became popular 3 years ago in Shangjing. Hejian is a poor and remote place. I heard that some gentry families can't even keep their basic decency. It's already good enough to have clothes to cover their bodies. Lang Jun, just bear with it for a while. When the matter blows over, master and madam will come to take you back. Meng Liang secretly gritted his teeth in anger, but he had to admit that what the manservant said made sense. It was not the time to be picky. If it weren't for Meng Hun, I wouldn't have to suffer like this. Hearing what the manservant said, Meng Liang suddenly became angry. He is just a lowly servant of the Mengs. How dare he throw a tantrum and make father so angry? The manservant echoed, that's right. Meng Han is just like his name. He is a stupid person. Lang Jun, you don't have to be angry with him. When the Meng's army kills all the rebels, Meng Han will fall into your hands. Meng Han was the powerful man who burned down the county governor's mansion. He used to be a servant of the Mengs and had climbed to the position of the county governor with great effort. If it were in the early days of the Xia dynasty, Meng Han wouldn't dare to say anything even if all the women in his family came to serve him, let alone his wife. But now, he really thinks that the Mengs are so weak that he even dares to bully a little servant. I'm so angry. The manservant's words did make Meng Liang's anger dissipate, but he still felt an unspeakable humiliation. Yesterday, he and the manservant had sneaked out and accidentally saw Meng Han sneaking into Hejian County. They were almost scared out of their wits. If he had known that Meng Han would be so persistent, he wouldn't have been so willful. He wouldn't have ditched his guards and followed his friends here. Damn it! Thinking of the little girl he should have gotten earlier, and then thinking of the current situation, he couldn't help but feel pain in his chest. But the manservant also reminded him that they should hide in Lu Shi's mansion for the time being. They would contact the guards and servants when they settled down. When there was someone protecting him, Meng Liang was naturally not afraid of Meng Han. Meng Han could be killed by a random knife. Chapter 130. Young master, don't be angry. It's not worth it to harm your health. At that time, madam will be distressed, and I will also feel uncomfortable. Meng Liang's temperament was eccentric and his methods were insidious. Countless servants and maids had been killed by him. Only the one by his side was perceptive. Her ability to take advantage of the situation and flatter others were far inferior to her. Ever since she started serving Meng Liang, she was still alive and well. Meng Liang's mood became much better after being flattered by the manservant. When they arrived at the Lu mansion, Meng Liang didn't feel threatened by Meng Han's attention. Meng Liang's heart started to feel restless again. Ever since he had sex at the age of 11, he couldn't leave a woman for even a day. Now that his life was no longer in danger, he naturally had to think about those things that made him happy. He couldn't help but think about the graceful figure of the young lady from before. Unfortunately, he had just thought of a way to sneak in and hadn't had time to implement it. The manservant had a thorough understanding of Meng Liang. To put it bluntly, when Meng Liang moved his butt, the manservant could tell what kind of *T he was going to take. The manservant rolled his eyes and suggested, Lang Jun, I heard that Lu Zhongqing was a rare handsome man in Hejian County when he was young. His wives and concubines were all beautiful. Let's not talk about anything else. Isn't Madame Gu Zhen also a charming beauty? The fact that Meng Liang was not Gu Zhen's biological son was known to everyone who had served him before. Meng Liang hated his eldest brother the most because he was talented and virtuous. All the elders of the Meng clan liked him very much and even decided to make him the successor of the clan. But what about him? Even though he was also the second son of the first wife, his actions were too absurd, and he accomplished nothing in his studies and writing. That was why Meng Liang liked to insult Meng Han every time he got drunk. The secrets he revealed included the mystery of his birth. Because of this, it was unknown how many groups of maids and manservants had been secretly disposed of. He was the only one who Meng Liang liked and spared his life. Meng Liang's eyes widened. The servant's suggestion had opened the door to a whole new world for him. However, even though Gu Zhen was not his biological mother, she was his biological mother in name. Moreover, she was his father's first wife. The manservant saw that he was obviously moved, but still pretended to be reserved, so he directly pushed him. Lang Jun is not related to that madam by blood. Moreover, I heard that Lu Zhongqing did not bring any concubines with him when he took office in Hu County. That madam has been alone for many years, how could she endure loneliness? Meng Liang was very tempted, and the servant took the opportunity to add more firewood. As for the fact that madam is master's legal wife, she has already remarried Lu Zhongqing. What does that have to do with the Meng family? She wasn't buried in the Meng family's ancestral grave after her death, and her name isn't recorded in the family tree either. She's no longer master's wife, and she's not related to you by blood. This. Meng Liang was completely convinced. When he thought of the fact that Gu Zhen was once his father's wife, he felt an inexplicable excitement in his heart. The manservant continued, "If Lang Jun is afraid of that lady's identity, I heard that Lu Zhongqing has a few beautiful concubines. Wouldn't they be able to please Lang Jun? If that doesn't work, doesn't Lu Zhongqing still have a daughter? Even though she's just a concubine's daughter and doesn't deserve you." Meng Liang raised his hand to stop the manservant and scolded him with a smile, "You sly fellow, you know me best." The manservant lowered his head and smiled as he accepted Meng Liang's compliment. He secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. Although it would be unfair to Lu Shi to shift the blame to Meng Liang, if Meng Liang's Lang Jun was still thinking about the young lady and left the Lu residence without a second thought, his life would be forfeit if he was unlucky enough to meet Meng Hun. His family was still making a living in Meng County. If Meng Liang died because of his carelessness, his family would not be able to survive either. He didn't want to be the accomplice of a villain, but he had to look out for himself. Only by serving Meng Liang well could he and his family live a decent life. He could only hope that those stupid guards would find his Lang Jun quickly and leave the Lu residence. Only then would they be able to commit less sin. If they were unlucky, Meng Liang would ruin all the women in Lu Shi's backyard, and he would be at his wit's end. With that thought in mind, the manservant helped Meng Liang change his clothes and prepared to hand them over to the maidservants in the residence to wash them. "You. Come here." After searching for a long time, the manservant finally found a maidservant who was cleaning with a broom. When the maidservant heard the manservant call out to her in a rough voice, she was so scared that her head shrank. She stepped forward timidly and bowed. The manservant stuffed the clothes into the maidservant's arms and ordered her around. "Go and wash Lungjuan's clothes and bring them back clean tomorrow." If they were still in the Meng residence, Meng Liang's clothes would be thrown away after wearing them once. Why would they be washed and worn a second time? But the manservant knew that the Lu residence was not like the Meng residence. They didn't have that many ready-made clothes for Meng Liang to change into. The maidservant lowered her head and took the bag of clothes. Her whole body was trembling, as if she was frightened by the manservant's overbearing aura. Seeing that the maidservant was so afraid of him, the manservant felt proud. It was as if he had regained the prestige of the Meng residence, but he still had to belittle her. A small place is a small place. Even the servants are so cowardly. Just a little louder and they're scared like quails. The maidservant left Meng Liang's courtyard with the clothes. When she passed by the garden, she was so angry that she threw the clothes to the ground and stepped on them to vent her anger. But when she thought of the conversation she had just heard, her heart trembled. Her eyes fell on Jiang Pengji's courtyard. The maidservant secretly bit her lip and squatted down to pick up the clothes. She changed her direction and didn't want to go to the laundry room. At that time, the key to Jiang Pengji's courtyard had already been locked. The maidservant could only ask the gatekeeper in a low voice. "I have something important to tell Lang Jun in detail. Sister, please do me a favor and help me pass the message. I think Lang Jun is already asleep at this time. If it's not urgent, we can talk about it tomorrow." The maidservant shook her head. She was holding back the words in her heart. Her body was still weak and frightened. She had been transferred from the kitchen to the guest's courtyard as a maidservant. It was supposed to be a very leisurely job because there were very few people in the Lu residence, let alone staying overnight. But she didn't expect that a big Buddha would come today. She didn't pay attention to her volume and was overheard by the maidservant. "This is very urgent. Please make an exception, sister." The gatekeeper sighed and said, "Then I'll help you pass the message. If you annoy Lang Jun, you'll have to bear the consequences." In fact, Jiang Pengji had already laid down to rest. Hearing the maidservant's message, she was still sleepy. She picked up her cloak and draped it over her shoulders. "Let her in." The door opened and a figure wearing a maidservant's clothes walked in. Jiang Pengji immediately recognized the person. Chapter 131. The maid was the victim who had been forced by the servants when Jiang Pengji first came to the Lu manor. But she remembered that she had already instructed the butler to move her from the kitchen, where the work was heavy, to the guest room, which was very quiet. The maidservant raised her head. The words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. She didn't know where to start. The more he couldn't speak, the more anxious he felt. The more anxious he was, the more he couldn't control his mouth. She thought that she would see her Lang Jun angry and feel that she was playing with her, but she didn't expect her Lang Jun to look at her tenderly and comfort her with a gentle voice. Jiang Pengji looked her up and down. "Don't rush. Speak slowly." The rules of the Lu residence were not strict, but everyone had their own jobs, and the range of activities was fixed. The corners of her clothes and socks were stained with relatively dry mud that was as fine as dust. There were gardeners taking care of the soil in the garden, so the soil on the ground was slightly wet. The mud was thicker and bigger, and it was also sticky. Therefore, the dust on her clothes and feet must have come from cleaning the guest room. At the moment, there were only Meng Liang and his servants in the guest room of the Lu mansion. The clothes in the maid's hands were also Meng Liang's. Her clothes were neat, and her hair was clean. There were no traces of washing, which meant that she hadn't touched her hair since she combed it in the morning. Although she looked a little panicked, she didn't look desperate or humiliated. Therefore, she probably didn't come to find him because she was bullied by Meng Liang and his servants. Then why? Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows. The only explanation was that she had accidentally overheard the master and servant talking nonsense. In the blink of an eye, she had already made up her mind and her voice became even softer. "Think about it slowly. Tell me what you want to say. I'll listen here." It took the maidservant quite a while to overcome the nervousness and fear in her heart. She stuttered and roughly repeated what she had heard. Jiang Pengji's face remained expressionless as she listened, as if the servant girl's words were within her expectations. As a matter of fact, it was more or less the same. How could a dog spit out ivory? Similarly, how could a scumbag like Meng Liang say anything nice? To be able to scare this maidservant to such an extent, the content was definitely not ordinary. After listening, she nodded calmly. "You can stay here tonight." The maidservant's face suddenly paled, as if she had recalled something embarrassing. Jiang Pengji knew that she had misunderstood. She could not help but add, "I have my own way of dealing with the master and servant. They are not easy to deal with. If you continue to stay in the guest room to clean up, you might be at a disadvantage. I'll talk to the housekeeper tomorrow and have him transfer you to my courtyard. Your message was very timely. If I hadn't warned them in advance, I wouldn't have known that they could be this crazy." With regards to this arrangement, the servant girl naturally would not object. She even felt slightly relieved. Perhaps because she had been hurt before, she was more sensitive to the emotions of others. That pair of master and servant were not good people at all. If they continued to stay there for another day, she would tremble with fear for another day. Now that he had been transferred to second Langjuan's yard, he would be treated much better, just like a promotion. "Thank you, Lang Jun." Jiang Pengji asked, "What is your name?" "Your servant's name is Ah Zhu." The maidservant replied respectfully. Even though they were all servants, their monthly salary was different depending on which part of the Lu residence they worked in. All in all, second Langjuan's yard was the best. The monthly salary of a servant girl was more than double of what she used to get. With the monthly salary, she could still keep a few dozen copper coins for her personal savings after giving money to the family every month. Zhu? Jiang Pengji thought for a while and asked, is there any special meaning to it? Who gave it to you? The maidservant shook her head and said seriously, I didn't have a name before I came to the Lu residence. The servant in the kitchen took pity on me and gave me one. If that's the case, then change it. Jiang Pengji thought for a while. She already had Takshu and Xuanmei by her side, so she should add another one. Nongqin. The maidservant was illiterate, so she did not know which word was Nongqin. But it sounded much nicer than Zhu. Lang Jun had given it to her personally. Jiang Pengji was not sleepy, so she started chatting with Nongqin. Do you often do manual labor at home? I am very strong. Although her body was thin and weak, her strength was indeed greater than that of ordinary women. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to carry the red lacquered wooden stick and beat that servant until he breathed his last. However, because of her greater strength, she ate more than others. Jiang Pengji was amused by her answer. She praised her with a smile, it's a good thing to be strong. Nongqin was a little embarrassed. She had been scolded by her parents for eating too much when she was young. Her grandmother even saw her as a jinx. In the end, she listened to a broker in the neighborhood and sold her at a low price. Selling her not only earned them money, but also some monthly salary. As for how Nongqin would live in the future, her family did not care. Jiang Pengji said to Nongqin, do you want to learn martial arts from me? She wanted to change the world, and she had to start with the people around her. Who said women were not as good as men? As long as they did not disappoint her. Although it was a little late to learn martial arts at that age, she wanted people who were not afraid of death and had strength. The other requirements could be put aside. Nongqin was surprised, but she still nodded solemnly. Her life was saved by Lang Jun, so it belonged to him. Yes. Jiang Pengji smiled. Very good. Nongqin did not know why her Lang Jun suddenly smiled so happily. But she was happy when he was happy. Although it was just to promote a servant girl, it was related to personnel changes in the Lus, so she had to inform the housekeeper. When she heard the news the next day, Takshu's eyes widened in surprise. Lang Jun is going to teach her martial arts? Not really. I just give her some pointers, Jiang Pengji said with a smile. She is a silly girl. Therefore, she would complete Jiang Pengji's training even if she had to risk her life. That was one of the main reasons why Jiang Pengji chose her. Takshu did not understand, but seeing her Langjuan's cunning smile, she naturally understood that her Langjun admired the servant girl. Xuanmei was doing needlework at the side. She naturally glared at Takshu. She is a good girl. Why do you want her to learn martial arts and play with guns? If she plays with guns and sticks, how can she serve her in-laws when she gets married? How can she be a good wife and teach her children? Won't she blame you if she can't get married? Jiang Pengji said calmly, why should she serve her in-laws and teach her children? Xuanmei was about to explain the reason, but she suddenly remembered her Langjuan's gender. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew she was unlucky. Chapter 132. When you belittle yourself, don't blame others for hitting you when you're down. If she could do it all over again, she would definitely say no to the system. It was too scary to be reborn in ancient times. She would rather die in battle. She didn't pay much attention to it before, but when she carefully observed the culture of the era, she discovered a shocking piece of news. Humans in this era relied on the most ancient and primitive method of reproduction, which was to make women pregnant and pregnant. Streamer v. it's horribly backward. Such a waste of human resources can be sentenced to jail in the Federation. The viewers in the streaming room realized that the streamer's style was a little off. After understanding a little, they understood what she was complaining about. Now, there's nothing wrong with a woman giving birth to a child, right? Why do I feel that the streamer has a horrifying expression as if she's opened the door to a new world? But the pregnant woman who passed by just now had a big belly. I felt tired just looking at her. Haiku Shirchang, the medical conditions in ancient times were really bad. Giving birth to a child was like going through the gates of hell. They could lose their lives easily. I've read novels about internal strife in ancient times. Not only did women have to face the problem of natural dystocia, but they also had to deal with external harm. It feels like every woman in ancient times was an expert at abortion. But it should be better for ordinary families. There was a mix of viewers in the streaming room. There were people of all ages, and there were even many mothers who had given birth. When talking about the pain of giving birth and the torture of pregnancy, they had endless grievances. As they chatted, some viewers in the streaming room suddenly remembered Jiang Pengji's complaints. They were very curious about how people in the future world gave birth. Xinruo Binking, speaking of which, it seems like the streamer hasn't talked about how people in her world gave birth. Hot pot rice noodles, I wonder if test tube babies are popularized in the future world? Chunlai, test tube babies are possible, but I always feel that this kind of birth goes against nature and can easily cause social and moral problems. Because Jiang Pengji was complaining about the backward methods of childbirth in ancient times, the viewers in the streaming room boldly guessed that childbirth in the future world should be very simple, or it should be said that the burden on women was small. Otherwise, she wouldn't have complained so much. In fact, that was indeed the case. From Jiang Pengji's point of view, making women pregnant for a few months before giving birth completely went against the core human resources deployment strategy of the Federation. If anyone in her world dared to do such a thing, they would definitely be punished by the Federation and imprisoned for a few years. Host V, in my world, they definitely wouldn't use such a barbaric method of reproduction. Low efficiency, a waste of female human resources, and the quality of reproduction was also very worrying. Almost all women rejected this inhumane method of reproduction. There were frequent wars in the Federation. If they relied on such a slow method of reproduction, it was almost conceivable that most of the female resources would be used for reproduction. In that case, they would become reproduction machines instead of humans. This kind of behavior was completely prohibited by the Federation's human rights laws. No matter how dissatisfied Jiang Pengji was, she had to admit that the technology, civilization, and productivity of an era completely influenced the structure of society. Reproduction was inseparable from women, and reproduction required time and energy, which also forced women in this era to be confined to the backyard and inner courtyard, unable to create the production value that they deserved. As time passed, their social status would gradually decline. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but start bombarding the system. It's all your fault. He couldn't even let her die in peace. This was a violation of her human rights. Do you know how many people are waiting in line to be reborn? Are you still complaining about me? It was already good enough that it wasn't deeply grateful, but it was still bombarding it. Which system would be so aggrieved? You have to understand one thing. Transmigration or rebirth can't turn a pig into a human. Jiang Pengji sneered and opened up her venomous tongue. Smart and capable people can do well anywhere. There's no need for you to interfere at all. Losers will always be losers no matter where they go, unless you let them transmigrate and rebirth and conveniently give them IQ enhancement surgery. She didn't have a good life in her previous life. She was a general of the Federation, the commander of the 7th Army Corps, and held 1/10 of the authority in the Federation. Other than the commander-in-chief, no one could order her to do anything. The 7th Army Corps was ranked in the top 3 in terms of overall strength. Her life was written with inspiration and success. She ended at the peak of her life, but death could elevate people again. She didn't doubt what kind of position she would have in the history books. But the system inexplicably interfered. There was a huge gap between her previous life and this one. She wanted to strangle this damn thing to death. You're the unnecessary and hindrance. Jiang Pengji coldly concluded, causing tens of millions of points of damage to the system's soul. The system wanted to curl up into a ball. It was the first time it was so despised by its host. She even bombarded it for being a hindrance. In order to not be despised anymore, it felt that it needed to level up so that it wouldn't continue to be looked down upon. Host, if you continue to act like this, I'm really going to throw a tantrum. The system bombarded her ears, and its grievances could be heard through the electronic voice. I wanted to wait for 2 more days, but now I've decided to level up immediately. Level up? She had just fused a bit of force to level up her streamer's level, and now the system was about to level up and evolve? What a coincidence, hee hee. The system said, children will grow from babies to adults. As the host, in order to keep up with the host's pace of growth and to better complete missions, the system has to level up again and again. After all, every host was different. Whether it was the host's identity, origin, gender, personality, or even habits, they were all unique. As an inflexible intelligence, the system naturally couldn't treat all the hosts the same way. In order to increase the tacit understanding between the host and improve the host's service enjoyment, the system had to level up and keep up with the times. Not to mention that Jiang Pengji had already despised it to such a state. If it didn't level up and let her see its powerful abilities, it wouldn't be able to live on. It would let Jiang Pengji understand how important it was. With such a powerful cheat, it could be a winner in life. It said. Of course, some functions will be unlocked and some settings will be changed according to the host's conditions. In addition, for the system to operate normally without errors, it needs to be checked and upgraded regularly. It's also necessary to download patches. Jiang Pengji nodded secretly. I see. You really should level up and get some patches. Not to mention other things, its inflexible personality and way of doing things were indeed a little contradictory to her. Right, how long will it take for you to level up? For the first level up, there isn't much to download and install, and the time taken is also short. It will take about 12 hours. In order not to affect the host's daily streaming, the system will choose to automatically level up when the host turns off the streaming. She raised her eyebrows. I can only have 12 hours of peace. System. Get lost. Chapter 133. Even though it was just a polite greeting, Jiang Pengji had said that she would visit Wei Yuan's house the next day to apologize. However, Wei Yuan still held a grudge against her, but he couldn't make it too obvious. As a result, Wei Yuan's expression remained cold and stiff. Even though he tried his best to soften his attitude and make himself appear less stiff, it was the opposite of what he wanted. Jiang Pengji took in all of his emotions. Is your cold getting better? Jiang Pengji asked with concern. You look a little pale. I'm fine. I've already taken some medicine. I'll be fully recovered in 2 days. Wei Yuan stroked his beard awkwardly. He didn't have a cold, he just got sick from anger. Wei Yuan had his own interpretation of Jiang Pengji's visit that day because he had a different way of thinking. In order to invite Wei Yuan to be a teacher and teach Lu Shi one-on-one, the Lu residents had paid a generous sum of money. Not only did he pay for his studies, but he also received a considerable sum of money every month. During festivals, he would even give generous gifts and show concern for his well-being every few days. In the whole of Hejian County, the Lus had been giving him the best treatment. However, Wei Yuan had been taking a few days off recently. Even though there was a reason for it, something had happened in his family, it was a fact that his studies had been delayed. Wei Yuan felt that the student's visit was probably to urge him to go back to class as soon as possible. Wei Yuan felt an indescribable discomfort when he thought about it. He felt a little embarrassed. The student in front of him had seen his scandal. Even though they both had a tacit understanding and didn't bring it up, Wei Yuan was not easily fooled. How could he not know that Jiang Pengji already knew about it? Under such circumstances, he felt uncomfortable teaching the student again. He had to face the student's face every day. If it was in the past, Lu Shi would have scolded him in a righteous and confident manner. But now? He tried to imagine the situation in his mind, and a scene appeared in his mind. It made him even more uncomfortable. He simply could not tolerate that kind of situation. On one hand, the student seemed to be bowing respectfully to him, but in reality, there was no sincerity in it. On the other hand, the student was staring at him with a pair of eyes that seemed to see through everything. That feeling. It was as if all the clothes on his body had been stripped off and thrown in public. Wei Yuan knew that he was overthinking things, but he couldn't control his imagination. This student knew about the shameful scandal that he had tried so hard to bury. This made him, as a teacher, unable to straighten his back. They weren't even in school yet, but he already felt a sense of embarrassment and stage fright. Thinking of this, Wei Yuan's mood became even more complicated. Jiang Pengji acted as if she didn't see Wei Yuan's expression. She pushed the gifts that she had prepared beside her forward and said, "Master has been feeling unwell recently, but I haven't been able to visit you personally. I have let you down. If you don't mind, please accept this student's gift." Wei Yuan didn't want to accept it, but he seemed to think of something and changed his mind. He had the maidservant accept the gift. "From what you said yesterday, is Zhongqing back?" Jiang Pengji nodded. "My father has been back from Hu County for more than half a month, but he's still resting at home due to the long journey. He hasn't gone out to make friends or visit anyone. My father has always admired your talent and knowledge. If you wish to visit, I can pass on your message." Wei Yuan shook his head. The Lu Shi at that moment was the same as before. There was no trace of the intimidating aura from before. "Since Zhongqing is still resting, I won't disturb him." Wei Yuan chuckled and teased, "As for your words of admiration, there's quite a bit of falsehood in them. Who doesn't know that Lu Zhongqing is famous for being knowledgeable in Hejian County? You're being modest. My father and you specialize in different fields. How can we compare? My father is the governor of Hu County, and he works for the people. You, on the other hand, live in seclusion at home and concentrate on your studies. When it comes to being an official, of course you can't compare to my father. But when it comes to learning, I'm afraid my father can't compare to you." Jiang Pengji answered with a smile. It seemed like she was telling the truth, but there was a hint of praise in her voice. Although Wei Yuan didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his dull student had become more talkative after going through the ordeal. If it was in the past, he would have told the truth and offended him, which would have made him unhappy. Although Wei Yuan was an old-fashioned and strict scholar, deep down, he still liked to listen to flattery. But even though it was pleasing to hear, he couldn't continue with the speech he had prepared after Jiang Pengji's tactful reply. Originally, he had wanted to temporarily resign from his position as the teacher of the Lu Manor because of his illness and lack of energy. He wanted Lu Shi to teach him personally for a few months. He had even thought of a reason. Lu Shi and his beloved son had been separated for so many years. The father and son needed time and space to communicate. But now, if he continued to say that, it would seem like he was being unreasonable and purposely wanted to give up on his student. Wei Yuan felt a little conflicted. Jiang Pengji looked at him coldly. The audience in the streaming room was getting impatient. What was so interesting about watching two ancient people exchange pleasantries? Xinrua Bingqing, this is so depressing. When can you stop looking at him? Although Wei Yuan's looks were decent for his uncle's generation, he wasn't a peerlessly handsome uncle. He couldn't even lick the screen. Jiang Pengji laughed at the complaints of the readers. Host V, are you bored? Why do I feel like Mr. Wei Yuan's psychological activities are super interesting? Countless ellipses appeared in the streaming room. Everyone, host, we're not well educated. Don't make fun of us. Their eyes were sore from staring, but they still couldn't see any changes in Wei Yuan's expression, let alone analyze his thoughts. Between a teacher and a student, the most important thing was to test them. Wei Yuan was no exception. He knew Lu Shi's progress in his studies and his talent in this area. His questions were simple and easy to understand. After a long time, Wei Yuan stroked his beard and sighed. Very good. You haven't fallen behind in your studies. You've taught me well. Wei Yuan smiled bitterly and shook his head. It should be your father who taught you well. He wasn't being polite. He was speaking the truth. In the past, no matter how much he tried to teach him, Lu Shi was like a block of wood. He wouldn't ask what he didn't understand, and when he understood, he wouldn't say anything. He would keep everything bottled up in his stomach. Wei Yuan could only watch anxiously from the sidelines, but the child still looked confused. Chapter 134. He had changed a lot. Not only was he graceful, but his expression was also confident and proud. That was his spirit, not anything else. Wei Yuan was confused. How could he have changed so much in such a short time? But when he thought about what Feng Jin had said the day before, he let go of his doubts. There was a saying that one would be reborn when placed in a hopeless situation. It could be seen that after a great disaster, even a person with poor aptitude would be reborn and make great progress. Not to mention the personal guidance of Lu Shi, a gifted scholar from Hejian County, the effect was even better. Of course, Wei Yuan would never have guessed that the student in front of him was a completely different person. Zhongqing always said that everyone has their own strengths and that a teacher should be observant, focusing on the student's aptitude and interest, making up for the student's weaknesses and strengths. Now, it seems that I am not as insightful as your father. Wei Yuan said sincerely. There was a tinge of shame on his old face. There was not the slightest bit of hypocrisy. He was sincere. Jiang Pengji's attitude of watching from the sidelines changed. She now had a different view of Wei Yuan. She knew that if it were not for Lu Shi's memory and the books she had memorized, she would not have been able to pass Wei Yuan's test so easily. Lu Shi's grades had something to do with Wei Yuan, but it was not that important. He had wronged Lu Shi by taking responsibility for Lu Shi's studies. Qiguan Rang sat quietly on the side, watching the conversation between the two. To be exact, he was watching Jiang Pengji. He thought that the young man was very interesting. He was not a good person, but he had to show his most harmless side. Interesting. How interesting. After Jiang Pengji left, Wei Yuan still had a troubled look on his face. Qiguan Rang sat to the side, sipping his tea. After watching his future father-in-law's drama, he finally spoke. Master Gongqiao, are you worried about Lu Lanting? Wei Yuan trusted Qiguan Rang, but there was a hint of desperation in that trust. After all, they were going to be father and son-in-law in the future. Of course. If I continue to teach her, I'm afraid I'll mislead her. If I don't do anything, it'll be embarrassing. The last few words were practically mumbled by Wei Yuan. Qiguan Rang smiled. What's so difficult about that? I'll just resign and let Lu Lanting find another teacher. Wei Yuan shook his head in denial. That won't do. The Lu residence has always treated me well. Wouldn't that make me look like a villain? Qiguan Rang's brain spun and thought of another idea. He secretly sneered in his heart. Perhaps his idea was exactly what someone wanted. If that's the case. He thought for a moment and suggested, Mr. Gongchao has friends all over the world. Don't tell me you don't have a suitable teacher for Lu Lanting. All you have to do is to decline the offer and sincerely explain your reasons. You can't bear to delay Lu Lanting's studies and recommend a teacher who is suitable for her. When the time comes, the Lus will not misunderstand you and may even praise you for your generosity. Wei Yuan considered Qiguan Rang's suggestion seriously. A name flashed through his mind, and he was tempted. That's a good idea. That candidate is indeed suitable for Lanting. Wei Yuan hesitated. That won't do. Although that person is suitable, he has a strange temperament. Based on Lanting's personality, she will be at a disadvantage if she becomes his student. Qiguan Rang was curious. What kind of person could make Mr. Wei Yuan so tempted and yet so hesitant? Who is Mr. Gongcao's candidate? Wei Yuan casually replied, Langjie Yuanjing is the most suitable. In layman's terms, Wei Yuan was a famous teacher in the education world. If he recommended someone to the Lus, then the candidate must be of a higher level than him. Otherwise, he would be suspected of shifting the blame. However, the candidate must be of a higher level, suitable for Lu Lanting's temperament, and virtuous. No matter how he thought about it, there was only one candidate. Langjie Yuanjing? Qiguan Rang murmured in surprise. As mentioned before, in Dongqing, Qiguan Rang respected two extraordinary people. One was Lu Shi from Hejian, and the other was Langjie Yuanjing. As for the former, he was from a poor family and was of mixed blood. He had no connections to visit them, and he probably could not even enter their houses. The latter was famous all over the world. He taught students all over the 5 countries, and everyone in the world admired and respected him. To put it bluntly, Mr. Yuanjing was the leader of the education world. It was said that some students would burn incense and pray to Mr. Yuanjing's longevity tablet before their assessment, hoping that he would bless them during their high school. Yes. Mr. Wei Yuan nodded and stroked his beard. Yuanjing and I are classmates, and we've been in contact in recent years. Thinking about it, if I write down the ins and outs of the matter, Yuanjing will consider me and accept Lanting. Even if I can't become his student, I can still study in Langjie Academy. There are many knowledgeable scholars there, and it'll be better than studying alone. Mr. Wei Yuan felt much better when he thought about it. Qiguan Rang smiled bitterly. If it's Mr. Yuanjing from Langjie, the Lus will be very satisfied. Mr. Wei Yuan snorted. Throughout Dongqing and the 5 countries, no one is better than Yuanjing. It was said that people of the same trade were enemies. However, if the other party was Yuanjing, he was convinced. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that Yuanjing went to the northern borderline a few years ago and fought for the 3 cities made him inferior to Yuanjing. On the other hand, Jiang Pengji seemed to have expected it. Her mood remained cheerful. The viewers in the live stream also noticed this. In the words of the system, they were laughing like a sly fox that had gotten its way. Canghai Yishengxiu, every time I see the host smile so brightly, I feel like something bad is going to happen. Hongjun Laozu Jihua, who said nothing good is going to happen. To be more precise, it's the host who is lucky. At least, since she started following the updates of the streaming room, she had never seen anyone make Jiang Pengji suffer a loss. At most, it would be her giving in once or twice. Jiang Pengji got off the carriage, and a magpie flew over from the sky. She smiled and sighed. There's a magpie. It seems like something good is coming. Lanky Yubuz, every time I see the host pretending to be mysterious, I feel a pain in the ass. The audience in the streaming room did not know why she was happy, and she was determined not to explain. Wasn't it a pain in the ass? Jiang Pengji said with certainty, "Don't worry. We'll know in 2 days." She did not have high expectations about going to Langya to study, but since she was determined to do something big, she had to be prepared. Chapter 135. The Lus had to take the initiative to fire Mr. Wei Yuan, even if he had the intention to resign. Doing so would attract hatred. The best way was for Mr. Wei Yuan to resign and write a letter of recommendation for her. It didn't matter where he recommended her. She would go to Langyi in the end. The key was for Mr. Wei Yuan to resign. That way, both the Lus and Mr. Wei Yuan would have a way out. Jiang Pengji did not think too much before she arrived, but after carefully observing Wei Yuan's expression and speculating on his psychological changes, she felt a little more confident. The man was more understanding than she had imagined, or rather, he was a truly benevolent teacher who was willing to consider his students' future. In this era, a teacher for a day was a father for life. Many teachers knew that they weren't suitable for teaching, but they would persist for the sake of their pride. That would only lead the students astray. Even though Wei Yuan had his faults, he was a righteous man. He wouldn't make things difficult for his students. Langyi. TSK, I hope it won't disappoint me. She opened her sandalwood fan and leaned against the table. She closed her eyes and looked relaxed, but her mind was working on something. The war situation in this era was completely different from her era. There were too many differences. If they really wanted to do something big and fight for the world, they would have to compete for food, manpower, and territory. Grain was needless to say. They could always find a way to get their hands on it. Feeding off the enemy was one of the ways. Territory was easy. It was only a matter of time before Dongqing became chaotic. In the next few years, it wouldn't be too difficult to find a place. She had already picked a place. The second problem was manpower. She could make do with other things, but manpower couldn't be easily dealt with. Manpower didn't just refer to military strength. Simple troops could be solved with rice and money. Soldiers could be built, horses could be bought, and with a little training, it would be more or less presentable. But it wasn't so easy to get high-level civil and military talents. In this era, the literacy rate was too low. There were very few literate people. Talented people were even rarer. Truly talented people mostly had their own ambitions and goals. If they couldn't be completely convinced, they couldn't be used. Jiang Pengji wasn't worried about not being able to convince them. She was worried about not being able to find such talents. We'll talk about it after we get the talent. The other problems can be postponed. In her words, once you enter her door, you are her person. It was the same whether he was alive or dead. Her subordinates were only those who had retired, those who were still in office, and those who had died in battle. Whoever wanted to get off halfway would be slapped to death. Yes, she was just that domineering and unreasonable, and she hated betrayal the most. In his previous life, no one had dared to reason with this 7th Division commander. Other than the civil officials, there were also the military generals. After all, they couldn't rely on a group of scholars to fight for the throne, right? The requirements for a general and an ordinary soldier were different. The latter only needed to be bathed in blood and fight, understand how to cooperate with the army, be unafraid of death, and fight the enemy to death. However, a general was different. There were many ways to lead an army to war, and it was not enough to just have a bit of strength. Jiang Pengji could not use the requirements of her previous life to choose people, but the core was the same. Thinking about it this way, it seemed that he had a lot of things to do. Moreover, when she thought about it in detail, she found that military leaders had even fewer choices than scholars. Melancholy. Well, a streamer who did not aim for the emperor was not a good general, there was nothing wrong with that. Jiang Pengji maintained the sly smile of the audience. She did not wait for the groom to bring the stool and jumped down. "Is Su Ke back?" Jiang Pengji asked abruptly when she saw the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper was confused. He had no idea how his Lang Jun knew. He bowed subconsciously and answered, "Yes, Su Ke has been waiting for a while. He must have encountered some problems." Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "Behave well, and don't let outsiders out." The gatekeeper was confused again. Since it was an outsider, he must have been careful not to let outsiders into the house, not to let outsiders out. However, the servants of the Lus were the best at reading other people's minds, and the gatekeeper was no exception. He thought about Jiang Pengji's words from top to bottom. Suddenly, he slapped his forehead and understood. The outsiders in the Lus were the lady's maiden daughter and her servant, who had entered the house the day before. The gatekeeper said that Su Ke had been waiting for her for a long time, but Jiang Pengji saw that he was reading with great interest in the study. He did not feel annoyed at all. Instead, he looked like he did not care about what was going on outside. "Is there something wrong with the farm?" Jiang Pengji did not greet him. She went straight into the study and sat down in front of the desk. Su Ke was so engrossed in reading that he was almost scared by her. Even though he was scared, Su Ke did not do anything out of line, let alone throw the book in his hand. He put the book back in its original place reluctantly, tidied his clothes, and made sure that he was dressed properly before sitting down again. Su Ke shook his head and took out a self-made booklet from his sleeve. It was filled with tiny words. Bamboo paper was limited, and he was a thrifty person. It would be easy to waste the words if they were too big. Jiang Pengji took it and looked at it. The rules and regulations clearly listed all kinds of data. The content was clear and organized. Even if the words were small, it did not look messy. She was slightly satisfied. Su Ke was indeed talented in internal affairs, and he was a good housekeeper. But, he still lacked a partner. She thought of the county military chief who was hiding somewhere in Hejian County, and her heart began to race. Su Ke asked in a low voice, "Lang Jun, do you see anything?" Jiang Pengji laughed and threw the booklet back to Su Ke. She said angrily, "How can you tell me that the farm was robbed?" Yes, the data in the booklet was very clear. Su Ke did not falsify it, so the problem was very clear. According to the agreement, Su Ke would receive money from the Lus every month to buy daily necessities and grains for the troops. Su Ke was in charge of how to use the money and how to make the best use of it. The prices of the items were all reasonable. Then came the problem. She took a look at all the things Su Ke bought and the changes in the items. She found something strange. Rice, cloth, and the old hen that Su Ke had specially bought for the troops to occasionally eat meat were gone. Of course, they could not be used now. First, the time was not right, and second, the number was not right. The timing wasn't right, because Jiang Pengji had already prepared a few sets of clothes for each of the servants for the season when she had just bought them. There was no need to retailor the clothes. Even if they were to be used as supplementary materials for training, the amount was not right. "You didn't catch anyone?" Jiang Pengji did not know whether to laugh or cry. She had thought of many possibilities, but she did not expect it to be because of the theft of the farm. Su Ke looked down and said seriously, "Lang Jun is wise." "Wise my foot." Chapter 136. Tell me, what's going on? The farm was robbed. Don't tell me you don't have any ideas. Why bother me with such a small matter? Jiang Pengji felt that Su Ke needed more practice. She was not satisfied with his work skills. Seeing that Jiang Pengji was serious, Su Ke put away his frivolous and lazy expression. "I think you still lack a leader," he said seriously. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. Su Ku was not frightened by her expression. Instead, he continued, Langjuan's method is good, but it's still in the testing stage. It's better to get a ready-made one. What's more, both you and I don't know much about training soldiers. They're not as good as experienced veterans. Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes. You're saying that the person who stole the rice, cloth, and the hen is an experienced veteran? Su Ku nodded with certainty. Yes, I'm sure. Maybe he's an official. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Even though it was too much of a coincidence, she could say that she had guessed the person who stole Su Ku's rice, cloth, and hen. But this group of people is very vigilant and not easy to get close to. If I didn't stay here and learn some hiding methods after being a ranger for a while, I'm afraid it would be difficult to hide from these people. If you want to recruit them, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for some time. These people? More than one? Su Ku nodded. More than one. Based on the footsteps and conversation, there are about 10 people, and most of them are injured. If they weren't injured, it would be difficult for them to hunt. They wouldn't have stolen from someone's farm. People had always despised people who only knew how to crow and steal. That's interesting. Jiang Pengji didn't see them, so she couldn't confirm the identity of the group of people based on Su Ku's words. But she trusted Su Ku's judgment. Otherwise, he could have just brought people to catch the thieves. There was no need for him to ask for her opinion. Even if it wasn't the person she had guessed, he probably had some skills. Go to the accountant's office and get another 10 taels to buy a few more caddies of meat. Also, go to the pharmacy and prepare some medicine. If they want to steal, let them steal. Remember, there's no need to hide it from them. You must let them know that we've discovered their tracks and intend to show them mercy. If one day was not enough, then he would send them for 2 more days. He would send them every day until their injuries were better. In any case, they were not worth much money. What he had eaten from her would eventually be returned. This was also a test. If they had a sense of shame, they would definitely feel ashamed and bashful. This was a way to build a favorable impression. If they did not have any sense of shame or guilt, Jiang Pengji could also change her plan. Her initial impression of these people would also be greatly reduced. In any case, it was just some rice and minced meat, and the investment cost was small. If everything went smoothly, the return would definitely be generous, and it could be considered a steady profit. Su Ku listened to Jiang Pengji's words and maintained a surprised expression. How could he not be shocked? He thought he was shameless enough to scheme against others, but he didn't expect his Lang Jun to be even more shameless. Seeing his stupid expression, Jiang Pengji snorted angrily. Good deeds don't leave their names. They are either really good people or brainless good people. Which one do you think your Lang Jun is? Su Ku was silent. His Langjuan scheme could not be considered as a good person, but she was not brainless. Therefore, she would not do something like, good deeds don't leave their names. Not only did she have to leave her name after doing a good deed, but she also had to make others feel grateful and guilty. According to the moral standards of this era, 2 words were written on Jiang Pengji's face. Shameless. But he liked it. Su Ku burst into a smile. Jiang Pengji fanned herself and suddenly said, Xiaoyu, you should smile more, so that you don't waste such a good appearance. Su Ku stopped smiling and said stiffly, Lang Jun, you are making fun of me again. She snorted. Last night, I went to Langlang Alley with my father. Although I didn't go in, I stayed in Ingchan brothel nearby for half the night. Although Xiaoyu doesn't want to admit it, after careful comparison, I still think that Xiaoyu is 100 times more beautiful than those girls. Su Ku was speechless. There was a lot of information in that sentence. I'll take you there when I'm free. Jiang Pengji added with a smile. Why would Lu Shi suddenly want to take her to a brothel? She wouldn't believe that Su Ku wasn't involved in this. One had to pay for what he had done. Did he think that he could get away unscathed after causing trouble for her? In his dreams. Of course, Jiang Pengji had enjoyed herself last night, but that did not offset the trap that Su Ku had set for her. Su Ku still looked as if he had nothing left to live for. He had faintly realized that his Lang Jun was not only evil, but she also had a bad taste. What else could he do other than lie down and let her tease him? He only hoped that his Lang Jun was not gay and did not like men. Otherwise, he would feel a lot of pressure. Although the world nowadays liked men, there were still a few straight men who scoffed at this phenomenon, such as Su Ku. Jiang Pengji did not know what Su Ku was worried about. Even if she knew, she probably would not care. First of all, although she liked men, a rabbit would not eat the grass near its nest. She still had her principles when it came to right and wrong. Under the premise that she was a superior and a subordinate, she would keep a safe distance from the opposite sex or female subordinates who had a partner. She did not want any scandals to spread and bring fear to other families. That was completely unacceptable for Jiang Pengji, who had high mental requirements. That was not the only thing that Su Ku had come to talk about, but it was more important, so he mentioned it first. After the servants used the prescription that you gave them, the effect was very good. During the second day of training, they were in good spirits. For people who did not exercise often, when they suddenly received a large amount of exercise, their bodily functions would have serious discomfort. Muscle soreness was considered mild. This caused the training on the second day to be affected by the fatigue from the previous day's training, and the efficiency was extremely low. Jiang Pengji had left a massage prescription with pictures and words. Every technique was marked with the parts that needed attention and the appropriate amount of strength. Almost everyone could learn it. Su Ku made all the servants memorize it and apply it on the spot. The effect was indeed good. According to the servants, their 4 limbs were originally stiff and sore, and they couldn't feel where their arms and legs were. However, after massaging them according to the prescription, their 4 limbs became warm, and the soreness was greatly reduced. It was so comfortable that it was like soaking in a hot bath. Jiang Pengji was not surprised by this reaction. This kind of massage technique was originally compatible with military school students' training. After all, not everyone had the luxury of using nutrient solutions to relieve the pressure of training. Most ordinary students relied on this technique, and it had been tested and improved countless times. It was absolutely effective and safe. Chapter 137. I've seen what you've written. This is just the beginning. Anyone can do well if they put in all their effort. However, the most important thing about this kind of thing is perseverance. It's not hard to train hard for 1 or 2 days, but it's hard to do it all year round and even cultivate it into a habit. These people did not have the qualities that an elite soldier should have. Jiang Pengji was not as optimistic as Su Ku. She had led the most elite lion troop, and her eyes had long been trained to be picky. If she were to choose according to her standards, she would not be able to find a soldier who could completely meet her requirements in thousands of years. Of course, the situation of war in ancient times was different, and the conditions could not be so harsh. Su Ku saw that Jiang Pengji didn't seem to be satisfied or dissatisfied at all. He sighed in his heart. Lang Jun was indeed someone who wanted to do big things. She didn't know what had happened last night, but she felt that Lang Jun's ambition had become more and more obvious. I'll try my best to supervise you. I won't let you down, Su Ku promised seriously. Jiang Pengji snorted. Why would I be disappointed? Su Ku was startled. His lips moved, and just as he was about to speak, Jiang Pengji interrupted him again. If they don't train seriously, they'll lose their lives. Let me tell you something. There's been a commotion in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to quell the civil unrest. The distance between Hejian County and Meng County in Zhangzhou was less than half a month. If the rebels and bandits enter Hejian County, these people will not only have to wipe out the bandits in the mountains near Hejian County, but they will also have to deal with the rebels and bandits who are desperate. Jiang Pengji's eyes were fierce. Her eyes carried a murderous aura that even experienced generals might not have. It made people shiver. I've said it before. The Liu family doesn't raise useless people. She said coldly, if you don't want to live, then you'll die. For Jiang Pengji, the wars in the ancient times were at most labeled as violent. They were far from being cruel. After seeing a true mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, as well as a true purgatory on earth, the others were nothing more than this. Su Ke's eyes widened slightly. He did not seem to notice the words in front of him. His attention was completely focused on the sentence, "There's something unusual in Meng County, Zhang Prefecture." Meng County, Zhang Prefecture? Su Ke was shocked out of his wits. He then said, "That concerns the vital point of Dongqing. How could there be civil unrest?" Jiang Pengji rolled her glasses and said nonchalantly, "If it's chaotic, then so be it. What does that have to do with me?" Su Ke almost choked on his own saliva after hearing her words. Although the Dongqing royal family was unpopular, the power of the aristocratic families was increasing day by day, and the monarch of a country was no longer as deterrent as before, nor was it as charming as before to attract the loyalty of scholars. Dongqing was still a country. His Lengjuan's father was still the Dongqing commander-in-chief. Was it really okay for him to say this so bluntly? Without waiting for Su Ke to speak, Jiang Pengji said, "I'm just a commoner. How can I have a say in national affairs?" The civil unrest in Zhang Prefecture and Meng County would naturally worry the important officials of the imperial court. Speaking of which, it really has nothing to do with me. There was nothing wrong with his words. Su Ke was completely speechless. Even though his words were a little crooked, he still managed to make it sound. To be honest, Su Ke felt that he was rebellious. No one in the world could be more rebellious than him, until he met his Lang Jun. This was like comparing a small sorcerer to a great sorcerer. They were not on the same level at all. "Lang Jun, you're right." Even though he was conflicted, he still put on a bright smile. Su Ke thought for a while and said, "If what you said is true, the civil unrest in Zhang Prefecture and Meng County will spread to Hejian County in 2 or 3 months. At the very least, there will be news about it. That's for sure." Communication in ancient times was indeed slow, but 2 or 3 months were enough for the news of the civil unrest in Zhang Prefecture and Meng County to spread to Hejian County. Su Ke cupped his hands and said, "If so, I'm afraid I have a presumptuous request." "What presumptuous request? Just say it." Su Ke said with some embarrassment, "Even if the civil unrest won't spread to Hejian County, people will be in a panic. I'm afraid the price of rice and cloth will soar. According to my previous calculation, the daily needs of the farmers and soldiers can be bought once every 10 days. If the news of the civil unrest in Zhang Prefecture spreads and the price of rice increases, I'm afraid the money that can be used for 10 days won't be enough for 3 or 5 days." Jiang Pengji looked at him. Did he want to stock up on food in advance? In this era, it was important to have food in hand and not panic. Food was the most important thing. As Su Ke said, if the news of the civil unrest in Zhang Prefecture and Meng County spread to Hejian County, the price of cheap rice would skyrocket. It would be too expensive to buy. Since the Lus knew the news in advance, they should buy some rice as soon as possible when the price was cheap, just in case they needed it. Under normal circumstances, it was a good way to make money. She remembered that in her previous life, many big forces in the Federation relied on this method to resell war supplies. They bought it at a low price and sold it at a high price. Finally, they became the local leaders. But Jiang Pengji gave up after thinking about it. It was not that she was not interested, but it was too evil. Although she did not like the ancient times, she could not bully the common people. True experts relied on defeating stronger opponents and using them as a cornerstone to climb higher step by step, not by bullying the weak. Although she did not agree with it, she had to admit that Su Ke's words did remind her. I can't do evil things, but I can buy rice for my own use, Jiang Pengji said. When the time comes, you can go to the accountant and get some money. Put it on my account and buy another batch of rice. It should be enough for the people in the farm to eat for half a year. Although Dongqing was declining, the deterrence of the country was still there. Tsang Prefecture and Meng County were located in a dangerous place, so the court would not really leave it alone. The civil unrest would only be in a small area, and it would not spread to other counties in Dongqing. Therefore, it should be enough for 20 to 30 people to eat for half a year. Su Ke waited for a while, but Jiang Pengji did not speak again. He hesitated for a while and then spoke in a low voice. Lang Jun, do you have any other orders? Jiang Pengji frowned. No. If you have any ideas, just say it. Don't be so hesitant. Su Ke said gently, Lang Jun, it is indeed a good thing that you do not exploit the people for profit. But if you don't do it, I think the other gentry families in Hejian County will not let go of this opportunity. Most of them have fertile fields and their granaries are overflowing. She sneered. Others go to eat a pile of shit, but it does not mean that the shit is really fragrant. Why should I eat it? Su Ke was speechless. No, that is not what I want to say. Su Ke took a deep breath and tried hard to throw Jiang Pengji's strange but vivid metaphor out of his mind. It was too magical. Otherwise, he could not help but imagine a group of people eating a pile of shit and he would go to eat it. Chapter 138. But you've reminded me of something. Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows as she thought of something interesting. The corners of her lips curled up into a creepy smile. The sage once said that one would be a bastard if they didn't take advantage of others. This is indeed a good opportunity. Su Ke's lips parted slightly, but he was too shocked to say anything. Which saint had said such vulgar and shameless words? Stand up and be beaten to death. Since Jiang Pengji had decided to stir up trouble, she definitely needed the initial capital. As for how to roll the initial capital into a big snowball through a series of means, or even shake the whole world, she already had a vague direction in her mind. Based on Su Ke's position and character, he wouldn't instigate him to exploit and oppress the common people. In other words, if this kid really had any ideas, he would definitely target the landowning households and country gentlemen. Was he planning to take advantage of the situation and turn the tables on them? For a moment, a few classic cases of starting from scratch flashed through her mind. Although the two eras were completely different, the pursuit of profit was the same in the bones of humans. Jiang Pengji kept a faint smile on her face. Tell me your plan in detail. If I think it's good, I can consider adopting it. Her words obviously poked Su Ke's itch. His eyes flashed and he immediately threw away the slight prejudice in his heart. Although his Lengjuan's temperament was a little strange, his temperament was extremely to his liking, especially when it came to using people. Just because of this, even if his Lengjuan's temper was unruly, he could still pinch his nose and bear it. Su Ke cupped his hands and said, Sorry to offend you. Lang Jun, please come closer. Oh. It seemed that the content was really something. She actually had to whisper to him. Jiang Pengji smiled and took a few steps forward. Su Ke lowered his voice and said, Before I answer you, I have something to ask you. Where did you learn about the civil unrest in Meng County, Tsang Prefecture? When will it spread to Hejian County and nearby counties? She thought for a moment, then said, I first heard it from Wen Zheng. You don't know Wen Zheng, but he's a very interesting man. He must have heard this from a merchant from Meng County. I heard from him that the Meng army was very powerful. They actually sent soldiers to lock down Meng County and set up various checkpoints in Tsang Prefecture. They said that they were going to capture the traitors. The refugees would definitely not be able to move so quickly, but the merchants were different. They traveled from south to north, and they had their own caravans. A lot of news was spread through them. The Meng army could detain them and delay them, but they couldn't really detain them and prevent them from traveling. After all, Zhangzhou's current prosperity was inseparable from the caravans that traveled north and south. However, even if these caravans could leave Zhangzhou and bring the news to the outside world, these people would be repeatedly warned before they left. Most of the merchants were afraid of the Meng family's power in Zhangzhou, and they needed to rely on the profits here, so most of them would keep their mouths shut. A small portion of the remaining merchants might have decided to leave Zhangzhou after this incident because they had a strong foundation in Zhangzhou. It was these traveling merchants who could spread the news about Tsang Prefecture and Meng County to the outside world. Is this information reliable? Su Ku asked. Reliable. Absolutely reliable. Jiang Pengji's lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile when she thought of Meng Liang and his servant in her mansion. There was no other evidence more reliable than this pair of master and servant regarding the chaos in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. Su Ku pondered and said, "It's only been a month since the spring plowing ended. If we wait for the chaos in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County to spread, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for the summer planting, which is far from the autumn harvest. The farmers are still short of money, and they've probably spent half of the previous year's harvest. If the chaos really spread, the people will be anxious and will stock up on rice. How could the unscrupulous rice merchants let go of such a good opportunity? As the saying went, with food in hand, one would not panic. If the chaos in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County spread, how would the people react?" This was a question that could be easily answered. Su Ku could even imagine how high the price of grain would go. It wasn't an unfounded fear. It wasn't the first time he had witnessed such a scene when he was young. His mother sewed, mended, and washed clothes for others. The few acres of farmland that she had planted had all been sold. The small amount of money that she had worked hard to save for a year was not even enough to buy 20% of the food she had before. In other words, the price of food had increased to 5 times or even more than the usual price. Why would those merchants and wealthy families who had rice granaries in their hands care about the common people who couldn't afford rice and could only endure the starvation? Dongqing had been suffering from drought and floods for years, so there was a shortage of grain. The people who couldn't afford it could only dig up wild grass and tree roots, or even eat guanine clay. He had been a ranger for a period of time, hoping to help the weak. He had been to many places, and the scenes he had seen were even more shocking. "Merchants have always been after profits," Jiang Pengji said. "That's not strange. What I'm more curious about is that you're trying to get something for nothing." Su Ku was stunned, and then he said with admiration, "Getting something for nothing? Lang Jun, that's a good description." She said with certainty, "If that's the case, I think you'll need some grain to run your business." Su Ku's eyes lit up. He gritted his teeth and said, "Although it's against the way of a gentleman, I promise I won't hurt the people." "What do you promise me? Are you afraid I won't agree?" Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. Under Su Ku's shocked gaze, she said, "I was thinking that you need to change your temperament, so that you won't be at a disadvantage when you go against me. Now that I see it, it's right." Without waiting for Su Ku to speak, she added, "As a person, you can't be at a disadvantage no matter what. Getting something for nothing, I like it too." Jiang Pengji had already guessed Su Ku's plan. In her era, this kind of scheme was probably left behind by a merchant when he was young. However, in this era, it was extremely bold and out of line. The people of the world looked down on merchants and looked down on them. Naturally, they did not think of how to scheme against them in their inherent impression. Su Ku was indeed the accountant she liked. He was good at managing internal affairs, and now he had some awareness. His plan was similar to stock speculation, but it was more brutal. Plus, the information was not transmitted well, so there was a lot of room for manipulation. But Jiang Pengji changed the topic and said with some embarrassment, "The key is where are we going to get such a large amount of grain?" The smile on Su Ku's face froze. That was true. Although his plan was good, and he was 100% sure that he could make a lot of money, it was not easy to get the grain to start the operation, let alone get something for nothing. His cancer of awkwardness was acting up. He was very confident in this plan, and he was sure that he could make a lot of money for his Lang Jun, but he neglected the most basic condition. Chapter 139. Xian Rua Bing Qing, what is this called? Die before achieving victory? Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows. Looking at the screen full of ha ha ha, not only did she not feel annoyed, but she also revealed an evil smile. Lang Jun, do you have a solution? Su Ku asked. In fact, he hoped that Jiang Pengji would ask Lu Shi for help. The second branch of the Lu family was very rich. It would not be a problem for them to get that batch of grain. From his point of view, Jiang Pengji was Lu Shi's only legitimate son. It was a matter of course for her to inherit all of Lu Shi's property. The illegitimate sons in the backyard would at most get half of it and some cultural relics and antiques. If Lu Shi also agreed, the matter was in the bag. Yes, I do. I'm thinking, since it's a trick, why not be more thorough? The curve of Jiang Pengji's lips was very precise. It was neither cordial nor distant. It was just right. More thorough? Su Ming was dumbfounded. Tudu Feichio, every time the host smiles like this, I get goosebumps. Who's going to be unlucky this time? In the entire streaming room, it seemed like the person who understood Jiang Pengji the most was the viewer who had been following the live stream since the beginning. Jiang Pengji's style of doing things could be described as swift and fierce, but it could also be described as indecisive. When it came to enemies, she would never kill them in one go. Instead, she would repeatedly check if the other party still had any value to exploit. If there was, she would allow the other party to live for 2 more days. If there wasn't, she would only kill them once she was sure that they had no value. She squinted her eyes and smiled meaningfully. Xiaoyu, do you know where the culprit who caused the chaos in Meng County in Zhangzhou is now? Su Ku was puzzled. He did not understand the connection between this and what he had said before. In terms of wealth, how many families in Dongqing can compare to the Meng family in Zhangzhou? Exchanging a legitimate son for a batch of grains, it's worth it. Su Ku's eyes widened. After a long while, he said, Lang Jun, are you saying that person is in the mansion? Jiang Pengji opened her sandalwood fan and covered her smile with a smile. She said in a mocking tone, well, you sent yourself to me. So, you want to disguise yourself as a bandit and force the Meng family to exchange food for people? That won't do. If that's the case, all Meng Liang has to do is say a few words, and the whole thing will be exposed. Su Ku shook his head disapprovingly. However, he had always been alert, and he vaguely sensed that something was wrong. Although he had only spent a few days with this Lang Jun, it was enough for him to understand a fact. His Lang Jun was a black-hearted and merciless person. He would not do anything without benefits, and he would never shoot himself in the foot. Stupid. Does your Lang Jun look like a brainless person? Jiang Pengji snorted coldly and said with disdain, of course we'll let Meng Liang write a letter and send his confidants to ask the Mengs for the grain. What we need to do is arrange for someone to take over. As for Meng Liang's slip of the tongue, Huh, do you think he can still live after what he did in Tsangzhou and still want to do whatever he wants in Hejian County? In ancient times, there was a saying, dead people don't talk, and they don't leak secrets. It would be even better if they died without a whole body. Of course, in her era, it was a slap in the face, because dead bodies were more likely to leak secrets than living people. However, in this extremely backward era, as long as Meng Liang was dead, no one would be able to get anything on her. Su Ke was speechless. Lang Jun, you mean, after using Meng Liang, then, as he spoke, he made a chopping motion with his hand. Jiang Pengji snorted. In your eyes, your Lang Jun is so unbearable? Su Ke was dumbfounded. He felt like he could barely recognize the words Jiang Pengji said. What do you plan to do, Lang Jun? Jiang Pengji shook her head and looked at him with disdain. Do you know the basic requirement of a scheme? That is, all the benefits belong to you, and all the blame is on others. People can't say anything bad about you, and you have to maintain a pure and untainted appearance. Not to mention Su Ke's opinion of her words, the audience in the streaming room felt like they could no longer suppress the power of the primeval times. De Zhuangzhu Furen, only the host can describe shamelessness in such a refined and elegant way. Consulting Detective Curly Hair, as a newbie in the streaming room, I have heard of Meng Liang's shamelessness and disgusting nature. However, when this unlucky kid met the host, I feel sorry for him. What did this kid do in his previous life to meet the host? Shenjun Honglian, same. I feel sorry for him too. I feel like he won't even know how he died when he met the host. Although Jiang Pengji was so dark that her original form could no longer be seen, she was far more popular than the Virgin of 100 Flowers. The audience in the streaming room watched the live stream for novelty and pleasure. What she did really tickled the itch in their hearts. 1 word, pleasure. 2 words, pleasure. Inmei Xiangguazi, #laughter-cry. Am I the only one who noticed that the host said that it was the basic requirement of a scheme? Then what is the next step? I'm trembling in fear. I pity the host's future opponent in advance. The system was already having a headache over Jiang Pengji's self-indulgent behavior of bullying a little kid. The system said, even so, what if the Mengs trace the food back to you? Jiang Pengji said indifferently, I don't have any capital to buy food. How can I continue if I don't think of a way? Hearing her words, the system carefully observed Jiang Pengji's expression and hesitantly said, Host, doesn't your father have a lot of money? The dowry he gave you before. Bah, the list of assets listed in the granary has a lot of food. If you don't want to rely on Lu Shi, there are exchange and loan services in the mall. You can get as much food as you want. There's no need to take risks. She had money. If Jiang Pengji wanted to, she could exchange a large amount of food through the system. Why would she take the risk? Jiang Pengji said, I don't want to do that for 3 reasons. First, Lu Shi is Lu Shi, and I am me. I don't want to touch the old man's coffin. Second, I can get a batch of food through you, but how can I explain the source of the food? Lu Shi is a real fox. Do you think he won't be suspicious because I am his daughter? You are thinking too much. As for the third reason, which is the most important one. System, don't you think it's more interesting? Things that are too easy to get are harder to cherish because it's too easy to get. In my opinion, the added value is too low. In other words, Jiang Pengji liked to do it, mostly because it was risky and she found it interesting. Chapter 140. After speaking for a long time, the system remained silent. Jiang Pengji was bored. Forget it. Why am I talking to a system like you? You don't understand the thrill. System, what sin did it commit to have such a troublesome and gentlemanly, perverted, host? I think, even if I leveled up to 0, I might not be able to keep up with you. Jiang Pengji smiled. Fine. It's okay if you can't keep up. It'll be more fun to bully you. System. You're shameless enough to say what's on your mind. Not only was the system shocked by Jiang Pengji's shamelessness, but Su Ku also said that his Langjun was still his Langjun. Why do you look so shocked? Jiang Pengji said unhappily. It's decided for now. Do what you need to do for the next few days. Don't be so nervous. As for the thieves, just do what I told you to do. Su Ku cupped his hands in front of his chest and said yes. He wasn't a pedantic person to begin with. If he was a true gentleman, he might not be able to stand her shameless and outrageous behavior. Even if he didn't say it out loud, his impression of her would be greatly reduced in his heart. But Su Ku came from an ordinary family. He used to be a ranger, and he experienced the tragic death of his mother. He was thrown into jail and almost lost his life. He was more accepting of such behavior than normal people. Moreover, as long as Jiang Pengji did not harm his own interests, and she did not dig her own grave, he would not say anything to stop her. At most, he would think of a way to smooth things over. At the very least, he didn't like Meng Liang, who was a malignant tumor that didn't do anything. If he died, then so be it. If he could get the most benefits for his loyal Langjun before he died, then it would be a worthy death. Su Ku would have to be crazy to think about Meng Liang. Jiang Pengji looked like she was reading the bamboo slips carefully, but she was actually multitasking. A plan quickly formed in her mind. System. The system, which was pretending to be deaf and dumb, heard her calling it in her mind. It did not care about throwing a tantrum and immediately replied. What can I do for you? Jiang Pengji asked the system. I just activated the mission streaming mode not long ago. There shouldn't be any restrictions, right? What I mean is there a time interval between 2 live broadcasts of the mission? If there are no restrictions, I would like to open it again. The system was stunned. When did its host become so hardworking? According to the other party's personality, the system said after some deliberation, there are no restrictions, but this kind of live broadcast with the nature of completing a mission is usually more tiring. The host usually takes a break before starting the next mission live broadcast. Jiang Pengji said, it's good that there is no time limit. Last time, it was a fully interactive live stream, and the content was voted on by the audience. This time, I'll change to a semi-interactive live stream. I'll decide on the theme. If you want to level up, it's best if you do it within the next 2 days. The mission broadcast mode that I've chosen may last for quite a long time, so it can be considered a small unit. The system grunted and replied, I've decided to upgrade after today's live stream ends. It's estimated to be 12 hours, so it won't affect the host's daily live stream the next day. About the semi-interactive live stream, has the host already thought of the live stream theme? Even though the system felt a little uneasy, it was naturally happy that the host was willing to work hard on the live stream. After all, the host and the system were bound together for good and bad. I have a theme. You can put up a preview title and tell the audience in the live stream. Jiang Pengji suddenly laughed wickedly. The theme of this live stream is, How to Kill Meng Liang Gracefully and Efficiently. The system said. Huh? Host, are you really going to become a gentleman, pervert? Just put up the title. Don't ask too many questions. I know what I'm doing, and I won't mess up the live stream. Soon, the audience in the live stream room saw a new title appear on the screen. Preview of the next live stream, How to Kill Meng Liang Gracefully and Efficiently. Stay tuned. In the next second, the bullet screen that was full of bullet screens changed in unison. Chun-Li, can I ask if the next live stream is tomorrow? If it is, I'm going to stay in the live stream room today. Zhen de Jiangshan Ruhua, when the host says to kill Meng Liang, she really wants him to die. I feel sorry for Meng Liang. Kojiao Xiaofan, although it's wrong to kill people, why am I so excited when I see the preview? Tang roasted chestnuts, I'm looking forward to it, but I want to know when the live stream will start so I can catch up. Although the live stream room's upper limit had been increased to 10,000 people, it was still not enough for the audience. To get a spot in the live stream room, one had to overcome many obstacles. One had to have good internet speed, hand speed, and luck. If they could know when the live stream would start in advance, they would have a higher chance of getting a spot in the room. There were more and more people asking about the live stream. How could Jiang Pengji let go of such a good opportunity? Host V, the exact time has not been confirmed yet. You can follow the live stream room first. I will inform you as soon as the live stream starts. That's right. Many of the audience members understood and followed the live stream room. With one sentence, Jiang Pengji's live stream room gained a few thousand more subscribers. The system was speechless. Although the host did not like live streaming, her ability to seize every opportunity that was beneficial to her was impressive. After making arrangements for Su Ku, Jiang Pengji read for a while. Then she summoned the housekeeper and asked him about Meng Liang and his servant's actions. The old housekeeper seemed to be prepared. He reported Meng Liang's entire day's schedule in detail. He had been the housekeeper of the Lus for many years. How could he not be smart and capable? He knew about Meng Liang's situation, but as a servant, he knew what to say and what not to say. All he had to do was keep it in mind. No matter whose son Meng Liang was, whether he was a dragon or a tiger, he had to kneel before him, let alone a worm. Keep an eye on Meng Liang. Let me know immediately if there's any news. At this point, Jiang Pengji suddenly paused and added, in addition, when the servants wash their clothes and tidy up their rooms, tell them to pay attention to the items that the master and servant are carrying with them. Also, don't let them get close to the kitchen. As she spoke, she took out the sachet from Yingchun house. Even if the housekeeper was knowledgeable, he would not know what it was. Chapter 141. We provide you with exciting novels to read. Jiang Pengji sneered. The dried herbs inside have the ability to confuse one's mind. If you grind them and turn them into spices and burn them in an incense burner or mix them with food, it can make people sweat, increase their heartbeat, narrow their minds, and create a sense of pleasure. Of course, if you put too much of it in, it can make people's hearts stop beating, their limbs twitch, and their mouths foam. The audience in the live broadcast room heard her words and became vigilant. Why did these descriptions sound so much like those things? Kojiao Dandan, damn, these spices can't be poppies, right? Zhenda Jiangshan Ruhua, have some common sense. How is this poppies? I'm a student of traditional Chinese medicine, but I've never seen anything like this. The world that the streamer is in is different from ours. It's normal to see strange plants. Teng Chao Lizi, streamer, it's better to destroy these things as soon as possible. I'm scared just by looking at them. Not only were the audience in the streaming room scared, but the old housekeeper also trembled. His face was full of shock and worry. How could his Lang Jun have such an insidious thing? Lang Jun, do you want me to mix these into Meng Liang and his servants' meals? Before the old housekeeper could finish his sentence, Jiang Pengji interrupted him. I got these things from somewhere else, but they're related to Meng Liang. I'm afraid they have these things with them too. It would be bad if they were made into powder and mixed with spices or food that has a strong taste. She purposely exaggerated the negative effects. The spices did have the effects she said, but they needed to be purified and concentrated. At the moment, if the dosage was right, it was a kind of spices that could refresh one's mind. However, the herbs in the 2 sachets in her hands had been purified in large quantities. If they were placed in a room with poor ventilation for a long time, it would indeed cause one to be in a trance. Those bastards had defiled so many women. The spices must have contributed to it. Jiang Pengji wanted to keep Meng Liang and his servant alive for a few more days, but that didn't mean she wouldn't restrict their actions. If they were to fool around in the last few days of their lives and hurt some innocent women, wouldn't Jiang Pengji be their accomplice? Not to mention that the master and his servant had their eyes on the second lady and the other women in the inner court. Hee, you really won't die if you don't court death. Since they didn't cherish their lives, then she would make full use of them. She didn't need to feel any negative emotions. When the old butler heard this, he instantly became spirited. His old face was filled with anger as he said fiercely, "If that bastard really dares to harm people, this servant will personally break his legs." This is the Lu mansion of Hejian County, not the Meng mansion of Cangzhou. Jiang Pengji was secretly amused and said, "Send someone to keep an eye on them in case they cause any trouble. Anyway, in a few days, they will leave the Lu residence. They won't be an eyesore to you. Maybe, you won't have this chance in the future." The old butler solemnly accepted the order, but when his gaze fell on the two sachets, he hesitated. After some thought, he tried to dissuade her. "Since Lang Jun knows that it's harmful, how can you keep it with you? Forgive this old servant for overstepping my bounds, but this thing should be burned as soon as possible." Jiang Pengji shook her head and turned the sachet in her hand. She opened her thin lips and said, "How could I not understand the housekeeper's good intentions? However, this thing still had its uses. I know it's harmful, so why wouldn't I guard against it? I won't let it harm me." The old butler sighed. Lang Jun, who had watched him grow up, was becoming more and more assertive. "Since Lang Jun already has a plan, I won't say anything. I just hope that Lang Jun will put yourself first in everything you do." Even though the old butler was a servant of the Lu residence, he had worked for the Lu residence his entire life. He had also watched Jiang Pengji grow up. To be honest, he had long regarded Lang Jun as his own grandchild. Naturally, he didn't want to see her get hurt. "Yes, I know what I'm doing. Don't worry, housekeeper." Jiang Pengji nodded. She was playing with others, and she was happy for herself. How could she be stupid enough to get herself into trouble? That was all he had to say, but he suddenly thought of something and said to the housekeeper, "By the way, as for Su Ku, ask someone to find out if he has any relatives in his family. If they are close to Su Ku, take care of them." The housekeeper was stunned. He didn't expect his Lang Jun to think so highly of Su Ku. However, when he thought of his master's attitude toward Su Ku, the old housekeeper calmed down a lot. He couldn't help but wonder if Su Ku had a bright future. "Yes, housekeeper." Jiang Pengji nodded. "I trust you, housekeeper." She suddenly made this decision not because of anything else, but because she suddenly remembered what Lu Shi had told her. In this era, blood ties were highly valued, followed by non-blood relationships such as teacher-student friendships. The structure of the social relationships between people was very different from the society she was familiar with in the past. For example, in the matter between the second lady and Meng Liang, in her opinion, Meng Liang deserved to die. No matter how much she cared about the second lady's feelings, it couldn't erase Meng Liang's sins. The answer was no, so Meng Liang had to die. Thinking about it was a waste of time. But in the eyes of the people in this world, her normal reaction seemed too cold-blooded, even heartless. Of course, that didn't mean that she was a person with high IQ but low EQ. In fact, her EQ was quite high. So after realizing that, she had to change her way of doing things. She had to take that into account when she thought about things. Su Ku was the guinea pig for the experiment. The housekeeper was swift and decisive. He was much more decisive than the younger ones. Lang Jun, this is what they're hiding. He pushed a delicate rouge box the size of a thumb forward. The old housekeeper was so angry that he almost blew his beard and glared at them. If it wasn't for Jiang Pengji's special instructions, who would have thought that the master and servant would bring such a dirty thing into the Lu residence? But the Lu's was not the palace. They wouldn't search people when they entered or left, and they wouldn't check the luggage of their guests. It's quite an exquisite effect. Jiang Pengji took the box and opened it. She saw that the powder in the box had been pressed into the shape of a cake. Even from a distance, she could smell the rich and refreshing fragrance. If she breathed it for a long time, she would feel uncomfortable and hot all over. The old housekeeper saw that she was about to touch the powder with her finger and quickly stopped her. He said, "Lang Jun, don't be careless. This thing." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.